position, a gigantic field of cars. Beautifully prepared, 10 seconds to go. 5. Johnson jumps beautifully, as does Charlie O'Brien and the Recar Commodore, and car number 1 stationary on the grid, and everybody just managing to find their way around the Warren Cullen Alan Jones Commodore, which is boiling and has not left the grid. There it is. That's the car that Alan Jones and Cullen, in fact, leaving for England tomorrow to talk to Jones about the preparation of the car and how it's going, as Alan Brown in car 4 slots into 3rd.
And if you thought it was noisy here before the start, it's almost unbearable now as the crowd screams and forward to Dick Johnson leading up the back straight.
Charlie O'Brien's 4th. He got a great jump from the start, but wasn't able to capitalise on it, and he's back in 4th place. Alan Brown going beautifully to be in 3rd, and look at the way Brock's hanging on to Johnson. There's not a second in that, which was the difference in practice times, but here's some determination and hard driving for you. Then watch them on the straight for speed, with a 3/4 of a litre bigger touring car in the lead. See if it can move away. The flags are out, the crowd's cheering, the arms waving, and it's on for young and old here at Sandown in the Hang 10 400.
Ensign Brown's car coming through there.
Alan Moffat, John Goss, Murray Carter, Alan Grice, Bill O'Brien, then Bond in the lead Capri. Warren Cullen car stationary back on the start line or just off the track, and certainly I think will be taking no part in the race, which is very bad luck for a very determined effort, and one that was first put out onto the track only a couple of days ago. Up the back straight, another car parked.
Looked like Rusty French, or there are 2 cars identical running as a team, Jim Keogh and Rusty French.
And for all that Peter Brock can do, look at the way that Johnson's moving away, then O'Brien. That's up the back straight.
Unfortunately, we can't see the number.
That's number 9. Or 6, Rusty French. That's the car that Bob Morris was going to share with you.
Well, I got that one right.
Did anyone see why Vern Shupman was so far back? He's running midfield. Must have got stuck in the traffic somewhere or had maybe half a lose.
The line.
He's well back.
Let's have a look at the field as it comes through with Charlie O'Brien there. John Goss, Alan Grice, Murray Carter. Sorry, there's Grice now. Alan Moffat it was. Bill O'Brien in 30. There's Vern Shupman. Car number 25.
He's a long way back. The plan must be for him to be taking it a little easy, but perhaps not that easy.
I suspect he had a moment somewhere in that first lap in the traffic.
But it's all Dick Johnson at the moment, opening a little gap ahead of Peter Brock now. Alan Brown, Charlie O'Brien. There is Charlie's car, the Citizen car. Brock through the causeway.
Left rear wheel getting off the ground as he lined the car up for that corner. Keep your eyes on that. The inside rear wheel in the Moffat car. Steve Harrington going very well there in the yellow and white car. And then the long Sandown straight. Brock. Alan Brown, Charlie O'Brien pressing in, Steve Harrington.
Harrington, Will, is only 19 years old. Drives very well for such an immature young lad.
Yes, he does.
He's very smooth.
A lot of money into it as we look then at Moffat leading Carter.
There's an old duo.
If Alan Moffat will like that, Murray Carter's prepared to run along with that sort of comment because he started racing motorcycles as he moved out there to have a crack at Moffat up the back straight with the race leader. Just gently easing the car along and Brock losing nothing in the last couple of laps. They've done 3.5, coming up to complete 4, 115 to finish. When they complete this one, look at the lead being built up. And victory signals, or, oh, well, no, for cars that he's lapping, can you believe it, in 4 laps. So, on that basis, the slower cars will be lapped some 26 times by such as Dick Johnson and Peter Brock in the later parts of the race.
It's going under Chris Hayer's Volkswagen Golf, yellow car. Brock's through safely. So it's still Johnson and Brock up the back straight, still with that same gap between the 2 cars.
On those calculations of yours, Will, this race could well be decided by the luck in the traffic. Very much so.
Very often the case in these endurance races.
Well, with so many cars out on the track as well. The 49-car field is a gigantic field. And look how Brock is losing nothing as Johnson has to lead the charge through the traffic. And inevitably will lose fractions as he does so, and Brock, jubilant, flies the car hard into the corner and onto the main straight and has to make use of every little fraction he can pick up as he tries to keep this big blue Falcon in sight, and does a great job.
1 minute 14 and a half for Dick Johnson in that lap through traffic, which indicates the pace is quite hot. I'd say they lost easily a second on that lap due to the traffic situation.
And there's a lot less than a second gap between first and second place. Craig Bradkey, the leader of the 1600 class cars in practices, the car that they've just lapped, the Mitsubishi Lancer. And Brock, I'd say at this stage, making ground on Johnson.
How much
greater speed now, and physically you can see the gap's no different, so in time it will be therefore closer.
How much attention, Leo, will they have to pay to their tyres at this stage in the race?
They wouldn't be worrying them yet. And probably as the race gets on and extra rubber gets put down on the road, it will worry them even less, but they'll obviously have a good look at the tyres when they all stop, which is usually at about half distance, as a precaution, and probably would only have to put on, say, a right front tyre from indications of tyre wear yesterday. But they're running the 16-inch tyres, which would run a little bit cooler and obviously wear a little bit less.
Look,
there's a blown engine in a Gemini, the car 70 there, Colin Spencer's car.
And incredible traffic the leading drivers have to contend with, because once Johnson's hit the traffic, well, then they become aware that firstly Brock and then the remainder of the cars are coming through and they're more alerted to the situation. But in these opening laps, it's to the detriment of the race leader, Johnson. He's the one that's the advanced charge. Lapping one of the RX-7 Mazdas.
Well, 6 of the 119 laps have been completed. They're on their 7th, and there's no let up in this battle for the lead between Johnson and Brock.
Looking at the gap, I think there may not be a let up until this man in car 05 gets right up with Johnson and sees if he can wrest the lead from him, going against all paper calculations of power and weight of the 2 cars, but doing a grand job and closer to him now than he was on the opening lap.
Do you suppose Brock would prefer to have Johnson lead at this stage, Leo?
Yes, well, he's sitting in a very, very comfortable position, and as the race goes on, there are going to be retirements. The traffic will get easier, and at the present moment, Dick is having the hard work of actually having to split the traffic up, and Peter's just driving through the nice hole that Dick leaves behind him.
What he's also doing, of course, is putting as much pressure as he can on Johnson. If he can force him into a driver error in slipping through traffic, force him perhaps into a gap that he wouldn't otherwise want to take, or to work his tyres too hard or whatever, then it's to Brock's advantage. And that's why he's keeping the pressure on.
And they're classical Brock tactics.
Indeed, and Brock less susceptible to pressure than anybody. And in fact, the man himself is thought along those lines, as we were discussing with him yesterday.
I've won this race every year since 19 1975, hang 10-400. And every time I've won it, each year onwards, I've thought to myself, Lady Luck is not going to smile at me next year. And it continues to do so. I honestly feel as if this year, not only will it be Lady Luck, but Dick Johnson, Vern Schumann, and a few of the boys, this could be the end of a winning streak here at Sandown. It's going to be a very hard, tough race. In fact, it's going to be a classical race, I believe. It's going to be one of the hardest that we've had in the 10-year history of this race, or about 10 years. I'm looking forward to it.
His timing was impeccable, because you saw there how Peter Brock had to force his way between two cars, and then as he came up to Arco Corner at the end of the pit straight, just chop across the bows of the Alpha, and if the Alpha hadn't got out of the way, then they were going to hit. And what it cost him too. Mostly the threading through traffic has been to Brock's advantage so far, but that little session cost him a little bit dearly. Warren Cullen now under the attention of his pit crew, just painted last Wednesday, sign written on Thursday, and awfully bad luck for them. And let's go to John Smales to find out what's happening.
Gone wrong, most disappointing.
Certainly is disappointing. It appears we've put a stone through the radiator on the warm-up lap. I thought it'd get off the line enough to get back to the pits, but it just got too hot, and obviously things expanded and it wouldn't go. So I've just had to sit out there for the last few laps to let it cool down. We're hoping we'll get going at least. You know, who knows, in a race like this, we could still end up somewhere.
Nonetheless, Warren, it's good news that at least it's not something serious with the motor car that can upset Alan Jones's plans.
No, it's certainly not the motor car. It's just one of those unfortunate things that happen. There's a lot of stones down the back straight. We were in too close company with the other cars, and you know, that's motor racing, I guess.
Thanks, Warren.
It's an old saying, that's motor racing.
And a very sad saying.
And Alan Moffat trying to latch on to Johnson as they go up the back, and he's lapped now with 110 to go, 9 completed. Even Alan Moffat has been lapped by the leading car, and he was trying to latch on to Johnson and is tucked in front at this stage of Peter Brock. He's sitting in 12th place at the moment, so the race leader has lapped all but 11 of the 49 car field, just having lapped 12th position car. Coming up for the second time to Chris Hyer's golf.
The pace is such at the front that they're already 20 seconds ahead of the third and fourth car, which is Charlie O'Brien and Alan Brown running in very close company.
Completing 10 laps.
And of course, coming up now to lap 11th placed car. There's Moffat though. He's in 12th, looking good. There he is. Quite a number of the RX-7 Mazdas put onto the track with the peripheral porting arrangement, which gives them just a little bit more power, but which forces them in a class sense to compete against the outright cars. Now we have their third and fourth. That's the gap. And it's O'Brien leading in third place from Alan Brown, car 4 in fourth. Chopping across the
bows. Did you notice who's fifth?
Of Bob Holder,
Phil Rebel, yes.
John Goss in the Jag, right there. Most impressive, considering the very, very troubled weekend they've had.
Well, as Alan Brown has a real crack at Charlie O'Brien, the V12 Jaguar, 5.3 litres, XJS, that was debuted pretty unsuccessfully at last year's Hardy Ferodo 1000. And there it is, flying down through the S's. And this is its first race outing since then. And plenty of people have thrown plenty of muck, quite frankly, at John Goss. But in 5th place at this stage, he can hold his head high if he does nothing more today.
Very, very good job, because on the way down from Sydney, even their truck broke down. They've had a rough few days.
I think Charlie O'Brien's disappeared from that bunch. I saw a car pull off on the grass, and I couldn't see him with Alan Brown.
Now he's broken well clear of Alan Brown.
That Jaguar would be
yes, indeed, there he is.
Would be the heaviest car in the field. 1,500 odd kilos of motor car. Several hundred heavier than even the Falcon, which is heavier than the Commodores. And only a 4-speed gearbox. John would dearly like a 5. Here's the race leader. Their second place.
I was speaking to John about that, Will, and apparently the 5-speed Jaguar boxes are almost unprocurable, if not unprocurable. But he has made application to CAMS, and apparently it is within their power to let him use a gearbox of another brand.
So we see Peter Jansen and Alan Grice in close company. Jansen in car 3 was in 7th place on the opening laps. Alan Grice, who got that BMW going so well, spitting a bit of fuel through its overflow, but had an auspicious debut for that motor car. That's got a 5-speed gearbox. Fuel injection inline, 6-cylinder motor, 3.5 litres. Independent rear suspension as he pulls up alongside Jansen. Here's an interesting contrast. 5-litre V8, 3.5 litre 6. And look at the German car go. And then watch them under brakes. Very nicely turned out car under the development and watchful eye of Frank Gardner. Of course, they run the turbo sports sedan car as well. One of the motorsport papers saying that they're going into Formula Pacific next year, but that is very much an unconsidered and unplanned move at this stage. They could, but it's far from being anything like a definite. As we go back, still in the midst of the traffic, as he's going to be for the next couple of hours nearly, until he makes a very brief pit stop. Dick Johnson there in the placings at this stage. Lap 13, 106 to go. Well, for all that Brock's been trying, you can see from the gap there that he can't stay with Johnson. Thank you, says Johnson as he laps Steve Masterton and his Capri. Just a wave of the hand as he went up the back straight. John French, his co-driver, who, if they've got enough of a lead, will drive the car later today. Look at the oversteer from that. He came out of there. But they want a fair buffer before they start changing drivers, because they say it takes more time than it does to change tyres and add fuel. And John French, though, convincing Johnson that they must change tyres just as a safety valve, 2 tyres on the at their pit stop.
It's Joe Moore's Falcon, the car 30 there, the green car going through there. Keogh into the pits with his Falcon. Kai sharing with Andrew Newton, who was a very promising Formula Ford and later Formula 2 driver. One-time worked for Frank Gardner at the racing school.
Alan Brown has retaken Charlie O'Brien, 3rd place.
So John Goss there going through in the Jaguar as the pits already are busy.
Probably have some news from John Smales there, who's right on the scene shortly.
Jansen.
Keogh's car is in the pits. It's been here for 25 seconds so far. It's a reservoir problem of some sort. Something hydraulic is leaking underneath the car. I'll have a chat with Jim, see what it is. Jim, what's gone wrong?
We've got a bad miss in the engine, and we've popped the top off our gearbox breather, and that's letting oil onto the exhaust, so we've got combined problems at the moment.
Well, Jim, not a very good start for the Bathurst racing 4 weeks ago.
Well, we're rather satisfied with the way the car's gone to date, but unfortunately right now, not so happy.
Jim Keogh, thank you.
Jim, a regular competitor in touring car racing now, and in fact he's a lawyer who specialises in motoring business. Our leaders again, Dick Johnson, still with the shadow of Peter Brock. Very clear in his mirrors as he goes up the back straight, using every little bit of the suspension of the Falcon.
But the gap a rather telling 2.7 seconds. Not that it's anything like the difference that there was between the cars. Look at the work being put in by Brock on the Commodore. Nothing like the gap was in their practice times, but nevertheless a very handy one. And one now which Johnson may be able to capitalise on him without Brock stalking him absolutely in the rear vision mirrors.
In fact, even between Goodyear Corner and Dunlop Bridge, the gap increased markedly.
Johnson now not so much doing the work for Brock as he's cut away from him, Brock having to do his own work.
Yes, that makes quite a difference. That makes life a little bit easier, I think. I'm very interested in why Vern Schuppen is so far back. He doesn't seem to be forcing the car to get up. I'm sure he knows exactly what the capabilities of the car are, and he's got a couple more hours to do it.
Could he be going to run non-stop, Leo?
I don't think they can run non-stop on fuel, Paul, but I'd say that he could certainly be planning to run non-stop for rubber.
Goss into the pits.
This is critical. John Goss, the Jaguar, number 5. Off into the pit area.
Already quite a few cars in there before him. John Smales has some news for us in the pits.
Bruce Nowacki, the Vern Schuppen car seems to be back a little bit. Is there a problem with it?
No, I don't think there really is. I think he might have just got a bad start. It's just taking him a while to get going, so I think he'd be all right.
Are you satisfied in the position he's in?
Yes.
Yeah. Brock is forcing very hard in second position at the moment. Has he got anything left in here?
No, he's trying. He's just looking after it. He'll be right. Give him time.
That's right.
He committed, Bruce Nowacki, in that, was he?
No, well, he changed his answer, actually.
In mid-voice, he realised that possibly the sponsors might be watching this telecast.
There is the man we were talking about, Vern Schuppen in car 25, not looking terribly tidy, even there at that speed. Presumably some sort of suspension problem, maybe, Leo.
Well, he did have obviously some problem because he had a horrible first lap. And whether it's something that he's going to have to live with for the rest of the day, or whether he's just pacing his recovery, as he is obviously very capable of doing, we probably won't know for a little while. But the tactics of that car in the pits are going to be very, very worth looking at.
Well, he has Alan Grice very close behind him, with Peter Jansen even closer behind Alan Grice.
He's in 8th place. Vern Schuppen in 25, which means Grice is 9th. Jansen there, tucked in behind Grice. Joe Moore-Falcon.
Peter Jansen, another driver who obviously believes that the pace at the front is too fast and is content to sit back where he is.
John Bundy, Norm Carr in the Mazda RX-3, number 69.
There's Peter Williamson in the very unsteady-looking Toyota Celica this meeting. He seems to be wringing its neck on the corners.
He's trying pretty hard. His lap times yesterday were very impressive. And they've changed the colour because everyone in the team became quite convinced that green
well, in fact, it's
too unlucky.
Battle of the Boyne all over, isn't it? So they've gone from Ayr to Ulster, from green to orange.
The Bundy car, Mazda up the back straight as we look at the class placings there. Colin Bond in the 3-litre class leading Terry Shield and Jerry Burgess. Shield, like Bond, driving a Capri. And Burgess, Mazda RX-7. Moffat's Mazda and Peter McLeod and Barry Jones are peripherally ported and run therefore in the outright class. Cams has somewhat arbitrarily doubled their capacity. That's John Duggan in the pits. Doubled their capacity from a rated 2.2 litres to 4.4 litres because of the advantage of the peripheral porting. Non-peripheral ported cars, such as Burgess 54, run in the 2 to 3 litre class against the Capris. But let's hear from John Smales again in the very busy pit area.
And John Goss, who's always enjoyed the Beach Boys, says they weren't good vibrations in the Jaguar. In fact, very bad ones. They've split the oil tank. It's a dry sump engine. The oil tank's right up the back. And as you can see, down pit row at the moment is a whole stream of Jaguar oil. And that's why John Goss has now retired the Jaguar after getting up to 5th position in the race.
Daddy took the T-bird away, perhaps.
John's been worried with a vibration in that car, they've been changing lots of things in the transmission all the weekend. I would suspect that they haven't got to the bottom of it, and the vibration in the vehicle at speed has probably caused the tank to split.
Look at Alan Moffat, Johnson, still as they ever will be in this race. Johnson just holding it tight there as he goes under the Gemini, being driven by White. Have a look here at the contrast between the car that Moffat's moved into, away from a Falcon, up the back straight, the RX-7 Mazda, a car which he hopes in a long race such as this or at Bathurst will come into some very respectable placings, and says, I'll try and take advantage of your slipstream up the back straight, but there you can see the difference in the power. But Moffat said if we could get into the first 6 outright by the end of the race, he'd be very pleased, and he'd have every right to be too. He qualified 14th fastest. Very nicely turned out car. He ran here last year in a sports sedan race in an RX-7, which was imported from overseas, but with two notable differences to the one that he's currently running. It was on an 11.5-inch wide rear rims, where touring car regulations restrict him to 10-inch on the current car, and he also has a muffler on the current car, which he says stops the real punch of the power band from about 7,500 revs, or just a bit above that. It really only operates from about 7,500 up to the normal maximum about 9,000.
Still, the bottom line is you have to race under the rules as they exist, don't you? And that includes mufflers here, and if the car doesn't suit, well, that's too bad, because this certainly does. This car of Dick Johnson's.
As a point of interest, was the Japanese Mazda faster than this one? Do you remember?
Very similar times, very similar. He'd had a 16.6 in practices yesterday, and I think it was about a 16.4 or something in the Japanese car, so it didn't show as a great deal different time. But he says the car is a bit taily at the moment, tending to oversteer a bit.
I've seen the cars racing at Mount Fuji in Japan, the Mazda Works cars, where they run in a form very similar to our sports sedans, where they're stripped and very light and incredibly quick.
Peter McLeod's tucked in there behind Johnson, another one of the peripherally ported Mazdas, and one which ran very well recently, running in the second round of the Endurance Championships at Oran Park, up into, I think, leading the race at one stage and finally finishing third. The lead was only by virtue of pit stops, and finally coming home a most creditable third. There he is. The Bailey Chickadee Chicken Salika, just in front of Brock, was the second fastest qualifier in the 2-litre class, a man who's come forward extremely well in his motor racing in the car that he bought from Peter Williamson. Using his mirrors well there, well aware of Peter Brock coming through.
Warren Cullen still battling on with the hot Commodore. Whole mess of cars coming through Repco corner. Colin Bond there. Alan Brown with Peter Williamson. Williamson tigering like mad. Charlie O'Brien, the third of the cars there in your picture.
Joseph Beninka, car 46, the red Alfa Romeo that we saw Brock so aggressively overtake a little while ago, which was engaged in its own particular dice. And in that class, car 65 is interesting. The Holden dealer team special vehicles department, Holden Gemini, developed without no backing from Marlborough. It's just the Holden dealer team area, which is Peter Brock's department very much, being driven by Philip Brock, his young brother, and Gary Scott, the Queenslander, son of Glyn Scott.
That's a twin-cam engine, Gemini. Not normally sold in this country, but allowed in under the FIA group regulations.
It's very new. It's only been running for a couple of days.
Pending pit stop there.
Keogh again.
Warren Cullen.
Duggan's Mazda RX-7. Joe Moore. There's the Beninka Alpha, yes, just behind the Gemini we were discussing only a moment ago. With split pin driving it.
No, that's Gary in the car at the moment.
Oh.
Paul, yes.
He looked tall enough to be split pit.
Delightful handling car. I was watching it yesterday, and Gary's absolutely ecstatic about the way it behaves. I'd say through the corner off the end of the straight, it was the fastest car that I saw.
Let's have a look at how it goes down through the S's, particularly if it keeps company with bigger cars such as the Commodore just blasting through there. Very flat, some problems with fuel pickup at the moment, but more to come from this car. 160 odd horsepower, 190 odd from the rally car, which George Shepherd and Wayne Bell have been running.
I'd suspect that's the way those two cars are on the road. I wouldn't think the Alpha would be a lap in front.
Indeed.
I'd say Gary's possibly just past the Alpha.
So that's a change in the 2-litre class placing. The Gemini here, having cut and thrust with the Alpha, both of them twin-cam engines, both of them 5-speed transmissions. There they are, slotted in behind Charlie O'Brien. In front of Steve Harrington. No relation to you, Paul?
No, I sometimes wish he was. Dad's got plenty.
And Colin Bond there, the 3-litre class leader. So the 3-litre cars are lap up on their 2-litre fellows, which isn't always the case on some tighter and slower circuits. Sometimes the 2-litre cars can be really in there threatening with the Capris. And then, of course, in the outright class, still the situation of Dick Johnson, the Queenslander, leading in car 17 from Peter Brock, car 05.
Johnson.
There's Johnson. Let's have a look at Brock. There he is. Not much in it, but just enough to relieve the pressure by a fraction on Johnson.
Coming up to lap Peter Jansen and Alan Grice.
Give you an idea of the lap times they're doing, and an 11.9 yesterday was equivalent to 155.7 kilometres an hour average speed around here, and a 114, which is more in the area. What they've been lapping at so far is 151, so they've dropped about 4 kilometres an hour average speed around the circuit.
Well, we're approaching only quarter distance. Johnson coming up behind Jansen.
Jeffrey can barely hear you. Can we have more volume?
Up towards Arco Graphite Corner. Jansen, a particularly good driver in these endurance events, likes to settle down for his race. Still about the same position as they were on the last lap, so Johnson perhaps has eased his speed a little, or maybe he's having more trouble with the traffic.
Peter Jansen, of course, enjoying the very comforting thought that when he stops for gas, he'll be slipping in Larry Perkins, and Larry will get on with the job, as we all know.
Well, there he is, old furry face himself.
Jansen, who's had such a good run in the Bathurst Enduros with Larry Perkins. Thirds and seconds, but not so much success here. No good last year. Third, though, in 1979. And admitting to some 44 years of age.
And he's not going to let Johnson through without a battle, even though the blue car is lapping him. Now for Grice, who's the next car up.
Johnson just winding the passenger side window down a little bit. You can see it's just open enough to let some air in. Wouldn't do anything to help the speed of the car through the air. The buffeting and disturbed air that would create would be detrimental only fractionally to its speed, but Johnson obviously wanting a bit of cool air in the car. And Grice trying to show as he goes under the Beninca Alpha down through the S's that the big cars better watch their P's and Q's on the tight stuff, because he's every bit as competitive as they are. That's the lesson he's trying to hand out.
He laps the twin-cam Gemini Up Dunlop Bridge. And Grice pops past as well. And in the pits, Ron Wanless with the second of the two Ricard team cars. Or it's in fact Scotty Taylor driving the car and Kevin Kennedy. Ron Wanless usually drives that particular machine. Dick Johnson at Arco Corner.
And not very far off lapping Vern Shupin.
There is Shupin, the head of that bunch. Johnson right behind them, coming up on Peter Williamson's Celica, the orange car. Swoops past the Celica. Blue flags flying. Down through the S's, there's Shupin. There's Johnson. Just one more back marker between them.
So let's have a look down through the placings. As with the leading cars out on their 28th lap, 91 to run, we have Johnson from Brock, from Alan Brown, still in third place in car 4, still fourth place car 2, Charlie O'Brien, fifth place car 27 is Steve Harrington. So a lot of Commodores up here in the front running cars. Then the Ron Wanless, Ralph Radburn car number 16, Commodore number 16 should be next, but was in the pits as we saw. The Clive Benson Brown car number 11, and he shared on one occasion at Adelaide with Larry Perkins, and on this occasion is sharing with Gary Rogers.
And it's taken over a lap for him to get alongside Vern Shupin, but there he goes. The second of the Holden dealer team cars now a lap down.
Whatever Vern's problem is, it's not straight line speed, because Dick only just got past him.
It definitely looks like some sort of a shock absorber problem, or maybe a spring problem. The car isn't balancing terribly well in the corners.
Or maybe calculated tactics.
Could be. Bruce Nowacki wasn't saying.
Watching up the straight here compared to Clive Benson Brown, a far less experienced driver. Very successful and wealthy businessman, Benson Brown, but very inexperienced in motor racing.
In fact, that's the next Holden dealer team car he's driving. And the last of those?
The car in front is an ex-Peter Brock car, in the sense that they've just built a new car for Peter, and that is Peter Brock's car that he's been driving up to the last few meetings that Vern Shupin is in. The car that Moffat drove last year, served out a fair deal of damage to, has been pensioned off.
Well, that's the one that Benson Brown's got, in fact, the Moffat car. Murray Carter allows, or does he allow? Yes, he allows Johnson through. There's Brock, still within sight. Just coming up to lap his teammate.
1600 class leader, the Craig Bradkey Lancer 1600, number 68, qualified 38th fastest. So in a field of 49, nothing to be ashamed of. And in front of, I'm going to say, yes, even of Laurie Nelson's Capri, which had trouble in practices. And a Mazda RX-7, the Barry Jones car that had trouble too. Well, my goodness, count the cars there, and I bet you can't. But a good indication, as we saw many of the 1600 class cars, a good indication of just how many cars are around. Tending to bottle each other up. Car 59, John White's Holden Gemini, was a fair way back in the 1600 class. No, third in fact, third in practices. Alan Goff's Isuzu, number 61. Williamson, though, up the back straight. He's got a new Formula Pacific car coming too, as we look at Bradkey, leading that 1600 class. Rod Stevens, his co-driver, a very experienced driver in class cars. And in fact, Let's hear from Craig Bradkey as to what he feels about the Hang 10 400.
Commodore, which was the car Alan Moffat drove last year.
Well, perhaps we should hear from Gary Rogers instead. In fact, it's a very tight-knit team, this one, with Craig Bradkey, Rod Stevens, Frank Lowndes, all very experienced people. Bradkey used to be an absolute ace on rotary engines. Perhaps he should go back to that as well. It's a very quick little Mitsubishi.
Yes, they've done a very purposeful job with this car. It looks good, which is always a good starting point, but it goes pretty well and has come into some quite respectable placings in class. 1600 cars tend to be neglected often.
It looks to handle very well, Bill. I was just watching it through those couple of corners. It's very nice on the road.
Well, Rodney Stevens is well known for his trick handling cars. He does some very fine things with rear suspensions.
And we've found Craig Bradkey on the Magic Magnetic. Let's hear from him.
Well, firstly, to run the race, it's very important to us this time to run pretty hard from about the halfway mark on, because to us it's important that we can actually finish on 10 tenths this time, where we've normally been running Oran Park and Adelaide running at about 8 tenths to rest the car. So this time we're really testing out to see how hard we can go for Bathurst. Why it's important for us to win is because at the present stage we're sitting in second position in the Enduro with 3 points behind Toyota. So if we're lucky enough to see the HDT Gemini run first, they'll gain 9 points. If we can run first, we'll get 9 points, and it'll make us equal first going into the last round in a little baby 1600, which is very important to us.
Well, maybe a Turbo Sigma next.
Well, I think fairly definitely there will be, and very soon. What he was referring to there was, of course, the point score in the Endurance Championship, of which this is the third round. After 2 rounds of Adelaide and Oran Park, Toyota Celica lead on 18 points. Dick Johnson still the race leader. Mitsubishi Lancer 15, Mazda RX-3 with 12, Holden Gemini and Ford Falcon with 10, because both Brock and Johnson have dropped around. Brock dropped Oran Park, Johnson dropped Adelaide. Ford Capri and Toyota Levin and Holden Commodore all have 9 points. Ford Escort 2-litre has 6. The BMW 3 and the Chevrolet Camaro 1. So it's a championship for makes and models, not for drivers. There's Graham Bailey, the second fastest qualifier in the 2-litre class and running second in that class at the moment. And the Endurance Championship finalised at Surfers Paradise on November the 1st with the 4th round, which will be another race brought to you by ABC Sport. A look at this pack of cars. Terry Daly there, Peter Hopwood, that Capri, the Gary Scott Gemini threading its way through, the Beninka Alpha going 2. A lot of hard work being done there by some disparate cars. We've got 2-litre and 3-litre cars, and this Alpha Gemini battle now to be decided under brakes and in the midst of very thick traffic as they come. Oh, well, that worked quite well there for the Alpha in front of Gary Scott, but he's on him again and going to have a nice quick entry to Arco Corner. Look at the ground he made into the corner and got out so well. And Alan Brown charging off round this argument. And you see the Mitsubishi Colt pulling to the side of the track. Another 1600 class car, as is the Chris Heyer Golf. A car that's been campaigned for 3 or 4 seasons now, the Golf. It's done a lot of work and had one involuntary barbecue in a pit stop at Bathurst.
It's a pretty torrid dice, this one, for the 2 litres.
But Leo, the problems of the traffic are that A, you may hit somebody, B, you might get separated from somebody with whom you're dicing and with whom you need to keep very close contact.
Just happened there. We just saw a perfect example of it.
Indeed.
You'll probably find Gary Scott to take 2 or 3 laps now to get back into the tow.
And also have to work your car to get by that. It might be tyres or might be having to rev your engine a fraction harder to make up the leeway.
Exactly. But you know, it's the same for everyone. The little fellas have got their problems as well as the big blokes.
Well, at least the Alpha has a proven reliability record. You can screw that engine all day long and it'll hang together. Gemini, a bit of a question mark, perhaps.
Well, being so new, it's just an unknown quantity. It's obviously going to be a very rapid little motor car with a little bit of further development. And possibly by Bathurst, it'll be right up on the pace.
Murray Carter and Vern Schuppen together. Alan Grice still within striking distance of the Schuppen Commodore. Superbly turned out black car with the gold sign writing. An absolute joy to behold.
Seems hard to imagine that the controlling body would object to the gold lettering on that car. And Chris Hire, hardly need to say, has had an off.
Well, did he slip or was he pushed?
Very tentatively regaining the track. But the regulations, that was the Burrell Chute Mitsubishi Colt, little front-wheel drive, latest hatchback model from Mitsubishi, which we mentioned earlier was slowing down and had some problems. And
somebody else has got some problems there, I'd say, and it's Warren Cullen again, unfortunately.
Put on a motor race and you'll have problems, particularly if it's a long-distance race. It's a matter of identifying who's going to have the problems and when. And the funny thing is that with all the best intentions in the world, it never takes much more than about the first lap or two to find somebody in strife.
In motor racing, I've never been able to quite work out which is the biggest disappointment, breaking down on the first lap or the last lap. That engine of Warren Cullen's wouldn't be very healthy because it was something that a motor car engine doesn't like, boiling itself.
Charlie O'Brien, fellow Queenslander Dick Johnson, overtakes.
Johnson is on his 38th lap now. He's completed 37. Race distance 119 laps, which is 370 kilometres. And here's the man who's stalking him.
And Brock has made a lot of benefit from the traffic and is a lot closer than he was to Johnson. It's just Charlie O'Brien and the Ibenica Alpha between him and the blue car. There he is. Peter
Johnson.
Brock.
Brock, at least, yes, really wound up there and trying to sling himself out after Johnson. And he's going to come through that gap come hell or high water. Charlie O'Brien's going to stay with him, he hopes.
And notice, too, the Gemini is ahead of the Alpha once more.
Great scrapping going on, actually, all through the race. And
there's Johnson's gone.
Johnson's gone. And Brock hits the lead. Peter Brock into the race lead on lap 39, having completed 38, and there's almost no room to manoeuvre there.
Oh, and Alan Brown stuck there in the traffic jam. Well, can't get round.
And the crowd roars. The Holden fans in the grandstand are leaping up and down.
Tyre trouble, Leo?
Now Johnson's restarting.
Difficult to say. Maybe just a lapse in concentration. Maybe touched a spot of oil.
Great shame.
Brock looked as though he was locked up too and was in trouble.
I'd say he was locking up because he saw Dick starting to go round.
Yes, indeed, it looks that way, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, a mistake by Johnson there, or maybe an unavoidable mistake, but it's given Peter Brock a very commanding lead. It took Johnson a long time to restart, and who's to say he may not have a quick visit to the pits to see whether there is anything wrong.
There's the response to that change in fortunes in this race. At just over 1/3 race distance, and we'll give you Johnson's position in the field.
He'd still be second.
Here's the situation again with Brock. The man looking ahead, always on the alert. But one wonders, yes, he'd seen Johnson going round and so quickly was knocking off extra speed and looking after his own situation. And Leo, what a feeling when your arch rival, the only man that can stay with you, when you go past him and with him facing the wrong direction.
Very embarrassing.
Williamson with an unscheduled stop there, I would say. Just came out of the pits and rejoined the race. So the action has really started coming here, as it always does about this point in an enduro. All all the unexpected things begin to happen. Everything looks set for a while, and then it all falls apart at the seams for somebody.
Of course, it'll probably be the worst corner on the circuit. If you must spin anywhere, that's the worst one, because it's so difficult to get the car turned round again.
Jackson in the pits. That's unscheduled. They bring up the bonnet. Larry Perkins there coming round, possibly hopeful of getting a drive, asking what the trouble is. Ian Tate in the background, the engine builder. Meanwhile, here comes Dick Johnson up the front straight with Peter Brock long gone.
Clive Benson-Brown there on the outside of the straight, car number 11, going to the pit area as Johnson comes through.
John Smales has some news for us.
45 seconds down on the Peter Johnson stop. Peter, what's wrong?
Oh, the brakes have jammed on. The bloody what's-her-name spitting out down there. The twit picked up the whole field. Our brakes have jammed on solid. Just coming into there. Well, it's the luck of the game. I think I'll have a cherry ripe.
Every year he gets that one in. And there's Warren Cullen. I really don't think Dick Johnson did it on purpose, did he?
I doubt it. I doubt it.
Obviously, it wasn't a tyre or a mechanical problem, because Dick's pressing on.
And here's our leader, Peter Brock. And we'll just have a good look to see how far ahead of Dick Johnson he is. Probably a good place to do that would be in the S's.
Just have a look at the record of this man. Australian Touring Car Champion 1974, 1978 and 80. Winner at Bathurst 1972. Then 75 when he won for the first time the bogey duo of here as well. And then 78, 79 and 80. And here 1973 and then consecutively from 75 until 1980.
Well, it's the length of the back straight that Brock is ahead of Johnson. Sorry, Will.
I'm most impressed with the performance of young Steve Harrington in this race. He's moved up into third place. That's an excellent drive for a young chap.
With Brock heading towards the front straight now, Johnson half a lap behind. There's Brock. And Johnson you saw going up the back straight. So quite a substantial margin by virtue of that problem. And there's Harrington, who's doing a very good job indeed in 27. That's an Alan Grice team car.
Yes, it's the car that Charlie O'Brien drove last year, and Charlie's probably not very pleased to see the car in front of him at the moment. But a good thing with young Harrington too is he has a very experienced long-distance driver to take over from him in Garth Wigston from Tasmania. Been around for a long time and is a very, very good driver.
I think he was announcing his retirement last year, and when queried about it this weekend, he said to me, well, except for Bathurst, and then of course you've got to warm up here for Bathurst. And but he is an experienced driver, one of those less well-known names, but who is so steady and easy on the car. He wants Brock to go left.
Alan Moffat is in 10th place now, so things could go well for him later.
Brock wanting to ease the car up the straight and have a little bit of slipstreaming. In the pits, the Alan Brown car that had been running third, then fourth in the opening laps.
Change of driver there, Alan Brown out of the car.
Putting Tony Edmondson in.
I'd be interested to find out if that was a scheduled stop. It seems a little early.
Well, he was mixed up in that brawl with Johnson just now, and maybe he could have hit the fence or done something, some sort of damage to a tyre.
Yes, obviously, because they're throwing a couple of tyres on. Probably flat spotted the tyres under blocking brakes.
Did a great job of stopping, just as Peter Brock did.
And the gap between Peter Brock and Dick Johnson is 32.5 seconds.
Johnson. There's Brock coming out of Goodyear corner, so he's still, in fact, increasing slightly. Johnson was going into Arco corner as Brock exited Goodyear corner, and that's exactly the way they were a couple of laps ago.
I think the psychological reaction to something like that, of passing somebody like Johnson all crossed up and stationary, is to be jubilant that you're in first place, and then to capitalise on it and start just lifts your morale a bit, Leo, doesn't it? Probably gives you half a second without actually using the car much harder.
Probably does, and then Dick, of course, has that other thing gnawing at his mind that he better not make another mistake. So he's probably just taking a few laps to steady himself down again.
Peter's corner can catch out some good people, as it caught out Alan Moffat just there. Arco corner, as it's now known. But Alan Moffat made an error there last year in the Holden dealer team Commodore, hit the fence, and that started a succession of problems for Moffat in a car which he gave a fair deal of hard work to. By the end of the race, it had a fair deal of panel damage done to it. And down through here, we saw him trying to hold out this man, Peter Brock, who wanted to head him to the line. Moffat was actually in third place at the time. But Moffat didn't want him through, and in the most aggressive daredevil manoeuvre, Brock got by him on the last lap down through the S's and actually headed him to the line, as well, of course, as winning his 7th Sandown Enduro.
As Gary Whittaker's old Tirana SLR just been lapped again for a second or third time, and Alan Moffat is still sitting there behind Peter Brock. Alan Moffat in the white and blue RX-7 there.
Peter Brock picked up another second on that last lap.
Interesting to look at last year's placings in the race, where Moffat was third in the Marlborough Holden dealer team Commodore behind Gary Rogers, who finally took second in an incident-packed race. Brock the winner, of course, Murray Carter fourth, Gary Cook fifth. Then we got into the small cars. In sixth place outright was Ray Cutchy, former Moffat mechanic, in a 2-litre Escort in front of Hopwood. Peter Hopwood in the winning 3-litre class car, who was 7th. And then Wade in a Dolomite was 8th. The Beninka Alpha was 9th. And Ray Alford in a Falcon came home 10th.
Graham Bailey heading for the pits, we just saw just then. There he is.
That's for the second time.
Yes, so obviously all is not well with that particular Celica.
Cars scheduling one pit stop. Cars like Dick Johnson and Peter Brock, Falcon and Commodores, planning to pit around 70-odd laps. But of course it doesn't much matter if you make it at this end of the race, which is what some of them at least are doing.
Brock not using all the road, going very smoothly and not fighting the car anything like the way he was in the early few laps.
Those turbo discs on the wheels, designed for two purposes. One, to get better airflow over the wheels, improve the drag coefficient of the car, but also to improve the airflow over the brakes and therefore brake temperatures.
Dick Johnson is running at 1:15, which is over a second slower than his earlier race pace.
There he is. You saw Brock down in the S's, Johnson at the other end of the back section of the track coming out of Arco, and there's the gap for you.
A daunting prospect perhaps for Johnson at this stage, although it could come out okay in the end for him. You never know. That's the beauty of long-distance racing.
We saw at Amaroo in the CRC 300, Brock completely muff his pit stop, reversed back into the pits and got on lines and hoses, and also so close to the fence that the rear wheel couldn't easily be removed from the car, and took a very long time and let Johnson and others back in front of him. But very, very rare that we ever see him make a driving error out on the track.
Well, he smoothly went under John White there at Arco.
It's going to obviously affect the nervous systems of the two respective pit crews, because they probably both realise that they could well be the major factor in which one of these cars wins this race.
It certainly was. The pressure was on them while Ever Johnson was running just in front of Brock, and there were only seconds in it.
As not doing my nervous system a great deal of good, I can tell you that. It's getting
It's fairly easy to lose half a minute in the pitch. You only need a wheel nut to jam or strip a thread or have a problem like that, and those seconds tick away. In fact, I'd say they'd be the longest seconds in the world to a motor racing driver, are those seconds that tick by while you're waiting for the crew chief to say go again. Seems to take a half an hour.
3-litre class cars, Colin Bond, Terry Daly, Capri's, Jerry Burgess in the non-peripherally ported Mazda number 54, RX-7. That's been the most settled of all the class bashes so far, because the outright class we've seen has been pretty hard, both in the outright first and second place, but also a little bit further back. 2-litre class has been a proper dust-up. The 1600 cars too have been in fairly close company.
It's Vern Schuppen,
who was saying one of the things you have to get used to in these cars is that when they move around a bit under brakes, as opposed to the sort of car that he drove at Le Mans, Porsche 936, which was second fastest qualifier and had every right to have come home second, but had a succession of frustrating problems, and problems no way reflecting on the team of drivers, was that they brake just so steadily compared to these compromised touring cars. They're purpose-built sports racing cars, and they said they move around under brakes, but you have to tell yourself, dial yourself in, not to getting the car to behave better, but to put up with it. And
the worst
because
thing
otherwise
you
you just don't get your time.
Yes, well, of course, the tendency is when they start to weave is to fight it and chase it, and then you weave more. So the idea is to just let the thing weave. Until you get a little bit accustomed to that, it's a rather eerie feeling.
Vern had an awe-inspiring accident after that excellent third place in a fairly old and relatively uncompetitive car at the Indianapolis 500 this year. Then his run at Le Mans, which he recovered back even to fourth place, but finally finished worse than that, down about 11th or 12th with various problems. And he had a horrifying accident recently in a car that he just bought for the American Ovals, a car with ground effects, and had a steering failure and hit the fence. And he said yesterday, and he wasn't joking, he said, I thought I was going to die 3 times in that accident. He said, firstly, when I hit the fence, at the concrete fence at some 300 kilometers an hour. Secondly, when I got upside down and went over the fence. And then thirdly, when they left me in the car for 5 minutes, hanging upside down, the smell of fuel. He said he got there and he was upside down and thought, well, they won't take long to get me out of here, and I am alive. But then they were worried about fire, and they stood there looking at him and wouldn't let his pit crew in close to him. And he seemed to be in some bother there, wouldn't let his pit crew in to attend to him, and said, no, it might go up. Left Vern hanging there. He turned off the ignition and was ready on the fire system in the car, but he was 5 minutes upside down hanging in the car, and in fact the roll cage of the car had come through into the fuel tank and was dripping fuel. But he still got some bruised ribs from that. But he's a professional racer that's done very well overseas, and we were talking to him yesterday, in fact, about his visit back to Australia.
Well, it's terrific to be back, and I'm doing it because it's a top drive. It's one of the top drives in Australia, and basically I love coming home. It's just a new challenge for me because it's something different. The cars are different to what I'm used to, and that's the extent of it, really.
How different are they?
Well, they're very different from, say, the single-seaters, the Indianapolis type cars, in as much that, although they're less powerful, the cars are much heavier. They're about twice the weight of an Indy car with about half the horsepower. And I believe that the people that are doing this are really driving them very close to the limit. And that's not easy coming from a single-seater, which is very precise, has as much power as you need. You get into one of these cars, these boys are not going to be that easy to beat. I think I'm going to have quite a challenge.
Whilst Vern was speaking, I saw Charlie O'Brien on the side of the road, or in the grass.
It's obviously with major problems for him to pull off there, rather than to go around for the hopeful attendance and rectification of a problem by his pit crew. He was running in fourth place.
go. Car number 2, looking as though its race is over, and that's starting to look like a car park on the splendid lawns at Sandown. Very green and lush, and the sun now shining brightly. And the race leader need hardly be said. Peter Brock 05, 51 laps completed, 68 to go. Getting on towards half-race distance, doing it in the impeccable Brock style. It's interesting to take a ride round with top touring car drivers, because the cars these days look so steady on the track and don't move around a lot. But in fact, Leo, the drivers have to do a lot of work and commit themselves, and in fact it's a lot less smooth in the cabin than it looks outside.
Yes, well, driving a touring car is distinct from a single-seater or a very quick sports car that, say, Vern is used to driving. It's more physical. There's a lot more arm waving and wheel twisting to be done. And it's, you know, the steering naturally is heavier than on a racing car. And you've seen the
that's what we're talking about.
Very wet people, the very wet people that get out of a car at the end of the race. It's a lot of perspiration, and even fellows in good shape, such as Peter Brock, will probably sweat off 2 or 3 kilos this afternoon.
And I wouldn't believe Dick Johnson when he was telling me yesterday that in the luggage compartment in the centre bin in the Falcon, he says John French takes out Vegemite sandwiches and a drink. And I wouldn't believe them. And French said, look, I'm going to be 2 or 3 hours in the car. I'm not going to go around losing weight like these young blokes. And he was dead serious. Absolutely serious.
Well, John's always been a man for comfort. They've also got a very ingenious little water bottle set up in the car. A lot of drivers have usually have to take a Staminade type of product in water to wet their mouth during the course of the race, but it's a problem because you have to suck it up.
He's in trouble. He's gone again. Dick Johnson, you could see him as he's hit the fence, and surely his race is run. You could see him as he was lining up there for the corner. The car quite unsteady under brakes, and this is not Richard Johnson's day. Damaged on the left rear there, planning to rejoin the race. Will the car be square? Is the left rear tyre all right? But you saw it, and we'll replay it for you in a moment, I imagine. As he lined up for the corner, he was in too tight. He wanted to get out wide.
He's going to lose that wheel.
And let's have a look at the replay here. He was in over to the left, lapping, in fact, Vern Schuppen, and was in trouble from there. Look at the tail starting to go. He's correcting, he's gone again, and he's in a lot of bother that early. And there he's gone.
Accident he had in a long time, I'd say.
And that's a pretty fast corner, Leo.
Yes, he'd be doing, when the car got away, would have been doing about 90 miles an hour. Fortunately, he'd spun most of the speed off before he hit that fence there.
And followed the old racer's maximum. The minute it got round, gave it all away and just locked the brakes.
Put the brakes on, exactly, because what you're going to hit, you want to hit as slowly as you can, obviously.
And backwards if possible.
Slow accidents, if you must have one, have a slow one.
Well, I'd say Dick Johnson at this stage fairly shattered. Because
yes,
they started well, but this sort of thing, frankly, doesn't get you running well. Is he going to the pits? And if he does, I think the best thing he could do, your answer is to that on this lap is that he's not. But I think the best thing he could do would be to hand over to John French.
Probably so.
And relax himself
yes,
and let French cruise the car around. But let's go down to John Smale in the pit area.
Well, I've got to worry John French with me, Dick Johnson's co-driver. John, what's wrong?
Oh, he's having trouble. His back shocks have gone off, and he's going to come in and change tyres, put some fuel in, and see what's going on.
That's 2 spins in the race, though. That's not Dick Johnson's
yeah, his back shocks aren't working at all, so he's having trouble under brakes.
It's not that's good. That's close to the James Hardy 1000.
Oh, we're experimenting with shocks, and we've made a mistake, I think.
Let's have a look when the car comes in. Thank you.
Might point out, of course, how John French is able to give us that information is that he's in two-way communication with Dick Johnson on the telephone, as Frenchy calls it. And obviously Dick's been reporting the situation to John.
Well, you can see the tail of the car leaping around quite a lot. It's quite soft, doesn't it?
The reason the shock absorber goes off, as John said, is of course heat. The shock is jumping up and down and having the problem of having to damp those great big heavy wheels and tyres on the back of that car. The shock absorber will be working very, very hard. They do generate tremendous
nearly gone
heat.
again. Just hanging on to it there. And in fact, this circuit's very hard because A, it's fairly bumpy and it's fairly high speed.
Exactly.
And so the heat feed into them is greater than you'd get at a lower speed circuit like, for instance, Amaroo. So with no Falcons to back him up, none other than Johnson qualifying in the top 10. Murray Carter and others running well, but having to rely on reliability, whereas, of course, Brock has had quite a coterie of Commodores lined up behind him, ready to join him in pressuring the forwards. Colin Bond, lead Capri in there behind Johnson. And very soon we'll be headed to the pits so that the race situation sees the Steve Harrington Garth Wigston Commodore, number 27, in second place, and the Murray Carter Falcon working its way steadily forward. Car 18, having said it wasn't in the top 10 qualifiers, it was 12th qualifier, but is now very nicely placed, third outright. And then in behind him, the Alan Grice BMW, the pit crew, the Johnson pit crew though, and his wife Jill, they're in radio contact with him. See if we can see her talking to him. But Alan Grice in the BMW is in 4th place outright. The Schuppen car, number 25, is 5th, and Johnson is 6th. Number 42 to the pits, John Duggan, the RX-7 Mazda running in the 2 to 3 litre class. Murray Carter, 3rd place though, was until he made his pit stop, car number 18, his old sponsor Brian Wood, talking to the quiet veteran, and in fact who's going to give Murray the prime mover that he still owns and which tows Murray's trailer around. He said Murray can't afford to buy it, I don't want it, I brought the papers and I'm going to give it to him as a present. A fine gesture from Brian Wood, formerly a Ford dealer down here, but now in other financial areas. But let's go down to John Smales again in the pit area.
Consternation in the pits. Where has Dick Johnson gone? Meantime, Murray Carter's been in the pits, taking 4 tyres, 3 churns of fuel. He's been in for 1 minute 25 seconds so far. Quite a slow pit stop, in fact. But Murray, the wily veteran, just about to go out again. And with the attrition rate that's starting to occur, perhaps not in too bad a position. But where is Dick Johnson is the question.
We don't know, do we? There he is.
Hunting his way up the back straight over the top of Rothman's Rise, and this awe-inspiring, exhilarating run down into the S's.
But incidentally, Alan Moffat now up to 7th place, so it looks like his plans were well laid, and we could see him in a very, very high finishing position.
Indeed, 58 laps completed by Brock, the race leader. 61 remain. So the next lap and a half will see Brock come up to half race distance.
Johnson still refusing to go into the pits at this stage.
Daly Hopwood Capri tucked in behind. He's been holding 2nd place in class and which won the 3 litre class last year and finished 7th outright. And let's hear again from John Smales.
Jill Johnson, what's the trouble? Why isn't he coming in?
I haven't heard as yet at the moment.
He won't tell you?
He told me I have to speak up a bit louder.
What's the reaction from your husband at the time he spent?
I can't hear at the moment. Just hang on one second.
Right. What we're doing is listening to Jill Johnson, Dick's wife, who is on the two-way to Dick, and she is actually listening to him at the time that he's having his losers. Now, I reckon that'd be a bit disconcerting for a young wife, actually. But she's attacking it like a professional, doesn't want to talk to me at the moment because Dick's talking to her while he's out there doing his racing. I'll ask John French while I'm waiting. Frenchy, why do you think he's not coming in?
I don't really know. We're trying to contact him, but I think he's got a few problems, and he hasn't told us yet why he didn't come in on that lap.
This suspension problem, the shock absorber problem you've got, just how serious could it be?
Oh, it's not serious enough to stop him, but it's serious enough to slow him a little.
What were you experimenting with? What were you trying to achieve?
We were experimenting with a different maker shock and make it handle a little bit better under brakes, but it hasn't worked.
Peter Brock says that under acceleration you see great churns of black smoke coming out the back of the motor car, laying rubber on the ground, and you need to get more traction. Is that what you're trying for?
Well, we're trying to stop that.
John French.
Development always going on in these cars. The Johnson seeking just that little bit extra performance, a little bit better behaviour in corners, over a long distance, particularly where components like brakes and shocks can tend to go off. But same thing's been going on with the Marlborough Holden dealer team Commodores. They've done various things this year, including reasonably significant change to the front brakes, where they've got the calipers now at the rear of the front disc. Looking there, though, at the Alan Grice BMW, which has slotted itself forward very nicely into 4th place and now would be 3rd.
Bernd Schuppen's going into the pits. This is going to be interesting.
This would be a scheduled stop, I'd say, wouldn't you, Leo?
Yes.
Leo, to get him out of the way before Peter needs to come in?
Yes, it would be, and I think they'll probably have a look at his tyres and see if they think they may have to change Peter's.
And John Harvey getting ready to get in the car. Out gets Schuppen. See what Leo meant about it being slow to change drivers. It does slow down the stop.
45 litres of fuel going in the rear in the meantime. And the man that was up in the commentary box with us here last year and was fairly frustrated in being here, with Alan Moffat taking over the car, and was particularly unhappy to see the damage being done to the car, and now will be delighted to be in the seat, to stroke it along in the way that this experienced driver can do. Second placed car up until this point, Steve Harrington in car 27 into the pits. So only the race leader among the major cars, and Grice, who will now move up to second in the BMW number 44. But let's hear from John Smales in the activity pit area.
John Harvey smokes out of the pits in 55 seconds. That was a slow stop for the dealer team. They usually do it in less than 30. But nonetheless, not a bad stop when you consider that all 4 tyres were changed on the motor car. Back up here with second place. It's young Steve Harrington, the Queensland driver, getting out of the motor car. The experienced Tasmanian Garth Wixton getting in. They've been in the pits for 30 seconds so far, fighting for second position. They're putting only 2 tyres on, the 2 right-hand tyres, and 3 churns of fuel, each churn of fuel weighing 40 kilograms, a hard thing for the pit men to lift. It contains 42 litres of fuel. Harrington briefs Wixton on what's going out on the track, and I'll grab Harrington as soon as Wixton's gone. He takes reverse gear, not the way to go, and he's gone in 50 seconds. Steve Harrington, you're in second position. That's not bad for a young man.
Well, tell you what, it's not easy out there.
You're up against some very, very experienced competitors. Just how hard has it been for you?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you then.
I said you're up against some very experienced competitors. How hard has it been for you?
Out there today or in...
Yeah.
Well, we've got a problem with the gearbox. It's jumping out of second gear. In the Dandy Road corner, I can't get second gear at all. So it's making it slow, but apart from that, it's going well. It hasn't been all that hard.
When it's jumping out of gear up there, that's a terrible corner for it to do.
It's probably the worst place of the whole track for it to drop out.
What do you got to do? Steer one-handed and hold it?
Yep, you got to hold it in with one hand and steer with the other.
How's your hand at the moment?
Sorry?
How's your hand at the moment then?
Oh, it's all right. This one's a bit sore.
Yeah, Steve Harrington, thank you, and we hope you stay up there in second.
The race leader, Peter Brock, 05, as he comes round on his completing his 63rd, starting his 64th, and with 56 to go into the pit area. A good lead, but the
over the Alan Grice BMW, number 44, which is second. The Johnson Falcon now, incredibly, with 2 spins, is back up to 3rd place.
Brocky, how's it going? Brocky's trying to take a drink at the same time. He's on board drinking stop. He's getting some Staminate into him, some stuff to keep him fit. How's it going, Peter? The car? Very good. No problems at all? No. You must be happy to see Johnson back where he is.
Yeah, but he'll come back.
Peter Brock is stuck into it. He has been in the pits now for 35 seconds. They've dropped 2 tyres down so far. He's doing a full tyre change. So 3 out of 4 he's done. The fuel is already done. Johnson's gone past, and Brock smokes out of the pits. He takes 2 of his tyres as he goes. 2 of the tyres that were removed from the car, he runs over them, and he was gone in less than 45 seconds.
Well, Johnson's back in the lead, albeit for only a few moments.
So Alan Grice will be in front of Johnson at this stage. But in fact, just check our lap chart too, because
Will, you were asking me before about the physical effort required to drive one of those motor cars, and we just saw a fit young man puffing as though he'd just run for 60 laps.
Indeed. Dick Johnson here, but of course with a pit stop to come. Brock chasing. Let's have a look at this gap. And
This is very good news for BMW, with Grice then in 2nd place, or actually in the lead on the road at the moment, and waiting for a stop. And here Johnson goes into the pits for his stop. This will be an important one.
Brock retaining his lead despite that pit stop.
He did indeed. It's very difficult at this point in a race to keep a total track on the positions. It'll sort itself out in 2 or 3 laps, and then we'll be absolutely certain.
Johnson in 3rd place when he came to the pits. We'll leave it to John Smales.
Dick Johnson, the disappointment must be great.
Oh, the shock absorbers are just hopeless at the moment. The arse end wants to jump out of the car.
I like to drive.
The biggest pig I've ever been in.
Now, this must be terribly disappointing to you, considering where you're going in 3 weeks' time.
Oh, well, 3 weeks doesn't worry me, because we'll sort it out before then for sure.
What's been the problem, Dick? What's the rear end doing to you?
Oh, it's walking all over the road, and it just locks up under brakes, and the car just goes backwards.
How dangerous?
Why don't you jump in and have a go?
Thank you, Dick. We're out of the car. I'll stand back from that. At 45 seconds he's gone. Dick Johnson using an old-style garage jack. Not what you'd call and a big prank.
Maninka Alpha and the Peter Williamson 2-litre Celica. Their first and second. The Maninka Alpha was arguing about 2nd and 3rd in the 2-litre class with the Gary Scott car. And
You'll
right
find the
on
Ron
the exit
Wanless car is involved in that as well. Will, the Ron Wanless car is off the track too. Car 16.
There we are.
Back
so
into the
3-car
pits.
prang. And boy, what a race of incident. It really has been, and all of those cars, if anybody goes as Dick Johnson went, is about where the car would end up being parked.
And Johnson back on the track, 1 minute 25 seconds in the pits.
Well, you heard Johnson there, in no way disguising his disappointment. We said at the beginning of the race how much he'd been enjoying his motor racing and preparing the car, which was the case up until today. A very relaxed man yesterday, but in seeking this improvement in performance in the car, they've gone the wrong way. Problem not very hard to get back to the previous state of the car, or perhaps to try something else that might make an improvement. But let's have a look at, while Johnson was in the pits expressing his disappointment, there, Williamson and Maninka first, and then bringing Wanless undone as well. Williamson recovering quickly and taking off again to contest the 2-litre class, to continue to do so. And this car that had been arguing about 2nd and 3rd place in the class, Gary Scott out, Phil Brock getting in.
Could well be the leader after that incident, although Peter Williamson did get away very quickly.
Yes, he did. He wasn't stopped after that for very long at all.
Ron Wallace was very unlucky there. He just had nowhere to go and had to spin. Otherwise, he would have really T-boned the Alpha, and it could have been someone hurt. It was quick thinking for him to get it backwards and into the fence.
Yes, Ron Wallace, speedway driver, and there is Beninka Alpha, which is bad luck for it. It's running well. And now Fire.
There's a bit of a brew up there. Great shame. Usually pristine motor cars produced by Beninkas.
That's adding insult to injury. Right in catching fire. That's all he needed to make his day, poor fella.
Well, they couldn't do it in a better place with all the firefighting equipment there at race control.
So let's have a look at the race situation prior to all those changes, with Brock, Grice, Johnson, Wigston, Moffat in 5th, Harvey in 6th, watch him and Moffat, Alan Brown 7th, Murray Carter 8th, and car 19 and under the attention of its pit crew, another young chap making good progress in touring car racing, Neil Cunningham. He's from Queensland, Steve Harrington's from Tasmania.
Although, amazingly enough, Neil told me this morning that he's just moved to Melbourne from Surfers Paradise, whereas I understood that everyone in Melbourne was moving to Surfers.
Colin Bond into the pits, or out again now, 32, and being followed out by the RX-7 of Jerry Burgess, which was earlier holding 3rd place in the 3-litre class behind the class leader, Colin Bond. So those two cars were 1st and 3rd in the 3-litre class.
Probably with Steve Masterson aboard now.
And race leader is Brock. One hardly needs to state that in the Hang 10 400. This man heading perhaps to his 7th consecutive victory in any race. That's a fairly unparalleled feat.
Well, the man ahead of him has won a few, and that's Alan Moffat there in the Mazda, up to 5th place.
Not often in top motorsport anywhere in the world that somebody can win the one race 7 times. Certainly not 6 on the trot, as Brock has already done.
The pit stop of Alan Moffat is going to be interesting, because I would suggest that he probably won't have to change tyres. There's obviously no driver change. He'll probably only hit it with 2 churns of fuel.
Here's the cheek that we saw between the two last year, Moffat and Brock. And Moffat doing it again, and having to do it, being forced on by the sheer competitiveness of the man.
I'd say Alan Moffat's pit stop should be something like 25 seconds.
Well, he is 2 laps behind Peter Brock. 3 laps now, I presume. Grice and Wigston and Harvey are both 1 lap behind.
There's the difference in speed and power of the RX-7 rotary. 260 horsepower, but it's very peaky power, relatively peaky power compared to the V8s. And in fact, Moffat due in some 8 laps time, which will bring him up to about 75 laps completed, because he's 2 laps behind the race leader Moffat, who's completed 69. But as I say, relatively peaky power, only about a 1500 RPM usable rev band on the car, from 7.5 to 9,000 revs. And the car very good in running at constant high speed, but not so good picking up out of slow corners such as Arco Corner, where he would be the only car in the race using 1st gear out of that corner.
Yes, he mentioned that he has to use 1st there.
V8s of the Falcons and Commodores just talk their way out of that very easily indeed. Peter Williamson in now for a check on 77, and the change of colour to the car doesn't seem to have done it any particular good at this stage.
Well, obviously a problem under the bonnet. I think they're changing a plug. Bad luck for Peter.
Let's hear from John Smales.
Peter Williamson has a top-end miss in his motor car. It's caused him so far to stop 3 times. for the first time, he lost 104 seconds. So a top-end miss is what's stopping Peter Williamson. The other Celica of Graham Bailey dropped an oil box seal, a gearbox seal rather. They worked furiously to repair that. So the two Celicas, despite aggressive driving on the road, are having real problems in the engine department.
Which is most unusual because Toyota in Formula 3 in Europe, the motors run very hard and constantly, as we see the Alan Brown car, who's been third and fourth in the early parts of the race, halfway up the back straight, stationary, and the driver hopeful of restarting it, and there's the Gary Scott Phil Brock at the bottom of the S's, and you can't get much further off the track than that.
Well, of course, Phil's done that before. He did it in a Charger quite a few years ago, so he knows the area quite well.
Flat front tyre.
He's done a tyre
and
just
wheel.
when he'd inherited the lead in the class.
Not to mention the front of the car that he's done too, so he's given it a nice old whack.
Well, there's quite a drop there off the track. It's been graded a little, but it's still a little way down there, and you don't come out of that unscathed.
And Leo, driving a car round on a flat tyre like that doesn't do anything much good, and in fact it's fairly hard to steer.
It's a bit of a problem. The worry you've got, of course, is that with the wheel banging on the ground and the tyre flapping around, it's going to cause more damage. But it's hard to tell with that tyre coming off. I wonder if the wheel is actually, the suspension is bent.
Looks that way, doesn't it?
Camera angles, it makes it difficult, but it looks to have a lot of
pushed back a bit,
negative camber.
It's got a lot of negative indeed, isn't it?
The famous silver race tape is going to be used in vast quantities on that panel work. Let's hope for their sake that the suspension damage isn't too serious.
It's a very unfortunate debut for Phil Brock in that car.
3 years since he's had a regular drive.
Yes, it's a while.
In fact, has had a couple of nasty mingles. He's pointing to the front of the car, which is fairly unnecessary. And again, we'll go down to John Smales in the pits where everything is happening.
Gary Scott, I've got it on good authority from the commentators who can see these things that Philip's gone off.
That's very disappointing. We're running very well. I think he must have had some sort of problem. As yet, we in the pits don't know what's happened, but we'll just have to wait and see.
It's difficult for a driver going out, though, fresh to get used to the track conditions. Could it have been driver error?
It could be. There's a lot of cars breaking down and there's oil all over the place, and when they come in, things cool down, and I just don't know. We'll have to speak to Philip. It's very, very unfortunate. I'm sure I'll speak for all the team. Will be very disappointed because we've worked our way to the first in the class, and we're looking very good, actually. The car is brilliant, and with 30 more horsepower, I don't think anyone will see which way we went.
You just come into the pits, Gary Scott. I'll let you go.
Thank you.
Certainly has got negative camber there.
Yes, that's they'll have to put that away. That car will be completely unsafe. I'd say if they attempt to continue to race it like that, it'll be black flagged anyhow.
Well, let's have a look at it and see how it goes. Now, how it appears to point into corners, how it behaves under brakes, because that's where it could be affected too.
I can assure you it will behave very badly from personal experience.
Another of the cars in problems is, they're everywhere. Jim Keogh there at car 22, sharing it with Andrew Newton, Melbourne solicitor, who made a pit stop early on in the race. He's parked off in the rough stuff as well. Quite a lot of interest in the 2-litre class, where all these incidents have been occurring. The Beninka Alpha, the Peter Williamson Celica, then this Gemini, which was up in the class lead. Let's have a look at it around the track, see how the car's working. Brock, you can see, being very cautious with the car, really trying to feel it out. And let's go again to John Smales.
There's the man in the pits, Andrew Newton, looking for Jim Keogh, and he's a man with nowhere to go, all dressed up and nowhere to go. Andrew Newton, I'm told by the commentators that your car's just gone off the track.
It should be. It's just gone
off the track.
Does it really? Yeah, well, we were waiting for him to come in. That's the first indication I've had.
Well, it looks like you don't get a drive today.
Well, that's disappointing, but that's the way it goes, I suppose.
Andrew, that's my...
Broken down there. And Jim Keogh, his helmet and gloves off, as you can see, trying to find out what the problem is and see if he can get it restarted. So he parked it rather than lost it.
obviously not paid up with the RACV.
Vern Schuppen had an incident like this at Le Mans, where in the Porsche 936 we watched Johnson scything his way along to the Porter at a power at least Dolomite, the car that last year came home in 8th place by Wade, that Dolomite. But Schuppen stopped out on the track at Le Mans, which is a very long track around, and had to get instructions from his crew back in the pits as to what to do to hobble the car back to the pits to get attention, because he wasn't allowed, nobody but he was allowed to work on the car out in that section of track. Fairly difficult with a very big rear deck on the Porsche 936. The oil flag, the red and yellow striped flag there being shown up the back straight. This Peter McLeod's peripherally ported Mazda number 40, which along with Barry Jones has been running for most of the year. The Moffat Peter Stuyvesant car just coming onto the track the first time this meeting. But these cars already showing the potential of the RX-7. Their suitability to Australian touring car racing. McLeod, like Moffat, having to run in the outright class, being rated at 4.4 litres because of the peripheral porting. And there, at lap 75, you can see the outright placings. Quite fascinating. 3.5 litre BMW slotting up now to 4th. The John Harvey Vern Schuppen car recovering well and in the steady hands of John Harvey. Now back in 4th place, and quite a threat, I would suggest, to a better placing before the end of the race. Be interesting to watch against Harrington. Moffat there would be delighted to be in 5th place on his initial outing in his new car. And Dick Johnson, considering his troubles, probably not too unhappy at being 6th.
We have 30 cars still on the road, Will.
But Johnson in 6th, as good probably as he's likely to be placed, whereas the BMW, and particularly the RX-7 of Moffat, with the potential of being better placed, although this bit of spoiler at the front of the car dropping down onto the track was visible from the rear of the car as we looked at it earlier on, and now can be seen on the right front as you're looking at it, the left front of the car.
He's probably clipped one of the ripple strips coming over the top of the hill. It's fairly easy to do, and that spoiler sits quite low on the car.
Might clip something else too. Car 52 offering something there, Bob Holden's Escort 2 litre.
About to say before all the pit stops started and things got so busy that people are probably wondering why Dick Johnson didn't pick up the shock absorber problem before the race. But of course, they wouldn't have done enough practice laps for the shocks to get hot enough.
That's right.
To show up their problems, because the car was going so well in practice that they did a minimal number of laps.
And they split up the laps anyway.
Yes, well, it's a smart thing to do. There's no point in wearing the car out on the Saturday.
As Peter McLeod in car 40 pulls in.
A great roar from the crowd here as on the track past the pits, the grandstand goes Peter Brock, and there you see John Harvey, the 2 Holden dealer team cars, 1st and 4th places.
This is a combination and a setup the 2 drivers like. They get on very well together. Harvey was very disappointed not to have been in this race last year, to have been replaced in the car, albeit only for 1 race, by Alan Moffat. And he acknowledges the great driving flair of Peter Brock. Brock acknowledges the superb backup service that he gets from John Harvey.
He's going to get his back up in a minute, I think.
Yes, he might indeed. And it looked there as though they were going to go into team formation, but judge for yourself.
Yes, well, John Harvey saying, OK, well, you get by me where you can. Just because you're the boss doesn't mean to say I have to kiss your boots.
And Brock thinking, well, goodness me, I don't know what goes on in this team. Everything was well behaved until Moffat drove with us last year, and he gave me hell. And now Harvey's doing the same. He's normally been so well behaved in the past, but Brock slots in underneath him in the Ripco corner. But will that be the end of the discussion.
Well, maybe they're going to tug each other up through the field, or at least tug John Harvey up a place maybe. He has Wigston ahead of him. But one time they had two-way radio contact, certainly with their pits, these two cars, and at one time they organised it so they could actually talk to each other during a race. I don't think they have that facility right now, though.
John Harvey has competed with great distinction and success in probably more areas of motorsport, Australian motorsport, than anybody, I think, and that covers Colin Bond. About the only thing he hasn't run in is rallies. But as a teenager, was judged one of Australia's best on speedway and speed cars, then came into road racing, ran in minis, single-seaters, he's run sports cars, and very shortly will debut a historic BSA Gold Star and take up motorcycle racing. And I know how hard he'll go. He doesn't hang about. He's a great mate of Mick Hones, who runs a superbike for Rob Phillis, and John Harvey will be trying his hand at that. Looking here at
past and present Ford heroes.
In the battle for the 1970 Gold Star, and going into the last race, Max, John or I could have won it. So he's been in everything. That's
Johnson, as we look at him now, with all the pit stops sorted out and the various problems, is in 5th place. The official scoreboard says he's 2nd. Our scorer says he's 5th. Alan Moffat there in 43. Tucked in behind him, and we have him. We did have him at 5th. Let's have a look at his position now. Alan Moffat in number 43. 6th.
So Johnson moves up 1 place and Moffat down 1. Still quite some way to go. It's a sort of centre period of the race, or coming towards that centre period. And there we have the John Player team ready for Alan Grice to come in.
Coming in now, Alan Grice running extremely well. He's 2nd outright. What a great run. His car down on power and up on weight on the opposition V8s. Well suited to this circuit. Will he drop his 2nd place to 3rd place Steve Harrington in car number 27? 4th place to car number 25. We'll go to John Smales in just a moment, but car 25, the John Harvey Holden dealer team car.
the key to this stop will be how many tyres they have.
The well-oiled Alan Grice team in the pits. Grice sucking on a drink. Alan, how's the car going? Still sucking on a drink, which is very hard to talk to him while he's doing that, but he needs that nourishment because you can see the sweat all over his face. 25 seconds gone, 2 tyres going in. Alan, how's the car?
Car's pretty good, just this little bit of a wisp of smoke here in the cab. Probably coming from the gearbox, but hard to identify. I'll just have another drink.
Car almost ready to go. In fact, he's not leaving himself much time to have his drink. 3 churns of fuel in, 40 seconds gone. The tyres are right. I'm going to stand back because I don't think I'm going to get another chance to talk to him. He's gone with his dry brake flap open, so that causes a problem for Alan Grice. I'd suggest 49 seconds to stop. That's not bad, but he's gone with the flap from his dry brake system open. Is that a problem for him with the dry brake flap open?
No.
Okay, the pit crew say no, so we'll see what happens.
It's automatic closing.
It's the airflow. Airflow over the back of the car, quickly taking care of that. It's merely an appearance cover. The dry brake system itself doing all that's needed to seal the fuel filling, which is the advantage of the system. It's automatic, that when the churn's plugged in, the fuel goes in, and when it's removed, without spillage of a drop, it shuts off automatically. Quite expensive system, but well worth its while, although the crew's still, as you can see, garbed. And talking about everything being all right, just a bit of smoke in the cabin, but there's a little bit too much smoke, I'd suggest, from the 635 BMW.
Well, there's a pipe hanging down under the car. It looks as if it may have been a breather, a blocked up breather perhaps from the gearbox. That is an oil smoke coming from the rear of the car from somewhere, be it the engine or the transmission. It won't be going on the road too much. It's going up in smoke, so to speak.
Alan would be very worried because he'd see that apart from what he's got in the cockpit, he'd see that he's losing it out the back too. If it's gearbox oil, well, the worry is, of course, that the oil will all be gone before the race is on.
As we look at Harvey, and then his team leader Brock going under Craig Bradkey, leaning on Craig Bradkey, and as he jumps past, just a little wave of acknowledgement, and comes now to the Philip Brock car being driven by his brother. See brother and brother there together, and no time for pleasantries. As the car got a bit upset, a bit jumped around there, as Brock had to go in tight and onto the curbing to get under Philip, his younger brother. Perhaps one of the, as we look at the outright placings now, still this great run by Harrington, Harvey chasing him. Rice back to 4th, 5th place Johnson, and Moffat now 6th. That's an interesting assortment of cars.
There's a sense of deja vu about this race each year, isn't there?
I don't think so, actually. That's quite an interesting array of placings there, and of varied cars and different people. As we look at the Mitsubishi Colt number 66, it's been having fairly consistent trouble. Ian Burrell and Rob Shute. And has been stopped out in the circuit a few times.
With Garth Wigston behind the wheel of the Harrington car now, too, you're probably looking at the names of 6 of the very best long-distance motor racing drivers in this country. But it only goes to show what a good effort it was for young Harrington to get it up into that company.
Indeed, he really has been doing a great job. But I was saying that Peter Brock not only is a fabulous record of road race performances, but I think a performance that was not as well accredited as it deserved was his run in the Repco trial. As a team effort, it was brilliant. To debut 3 cars for an event and to see them run absolutely, virtually perfectly, and come home 1, 2, 3 in an event of that toughness and that length, as we see the Beninka Alpha mobile again. But the way that Peter Brock ran the event was a great credit to him.
Yes, it was. I think a lot of people don't realise that rallying is a different form of motoring and driving. It requires different skills and abilities, and it just shows the versatility of the man. Is probably only Colin Bond would be the only other driver of that type of with that type of ability to be able to do both jobs so well.
He's a man who's specialised, whilst Brock has run not only in rallies and rally cross, where he was really something to watch, but also single-seaters fairly briefly in a Barana Formula 2. But Johnson, on the other hand, has specialised in touring cars throughout his career. And Leo, you remember him in his early days in an XU1, where he was sometimes exciting to watch.
Yes, he used to get a bit sideways more often in the early days than the XU1. I had quite a few good runs with him when I used to run prize to win the Chargers. And he was the top Queensland touring car driver for quite a long time.
The Alan Moffat crew.
Well, the interesting thing now is that Garth Wigston is now only 11 seconds ahead of John Harvey. They're both on the same lap, so obviously Harvey has a very good chance now of moving up into second place, albeit 2 laps behind team leader Peter Brock. Brock on 84 laps, the others on 82.
Moffat really has no potential to go better than 6th, because most of the people in front of him have made their stops. In fact, they all have. And although his stop now is going to be a quick one, or should be a quick one, it's obviously going to pull him back. So the race potential of the car, in fact, is in about the tail end of the top 6. And let's have a look at the stop, and when John Smales is ready, he'll tell us about it.
A lot of oil on the back of the car.
Moffat team goes into action. The professional Moffat team in action. 12 seconds down at the moment. So professional are they, in fact, that to stop flame back from the exhaust pipe, they put a great hose on it to stop the flames, which have just fallen off, going up onto the fueling system of the motor car, and that has just fallen off. Moffat takes 2 tyres, 32 seconds gone. He's already waved us away. Moffat will not talk. The third tube of fuel goes in, which is a little bit surprising. Didn't take too much at all. And 38 seconds, Alan Moffat, the fastest pit stop of anyone in the race to date, and he took 2 and a bit churns of fuel. That's some 80 litres of fuel. So he now knows that the Mazda RX-7, which he didn't know before he got involved in this race, will do about a litre a lap around Sandown Park.
Chris Hyer's Gulf pulls off to the left on the back straight as Alan Moffat rejoins.
In fact, if that were the true consumption of the car, it would be very modest, because 3 kilometres a lap, that would be some 15 kilometres or 10 odd miles per gallon. And obviously they haven't filled the car capacity, because Murray Carter, running an opposition V8, they do about 5 miles per gallon, but the Mazda gets a good deal closer to the V8s than that stop would indicate. But Murray Carter running well, now up to 6th place, past the higher Volkswagen number 53, stopped there on the right-hand side. And here are the placings. Changing all the time. Keep your eyes on Harvey chasing Wigston. Grice nicely settled in 4th. Johnson. Interesting to see whether he can do anything about Grice. And then Carter.
I don't think Grice will be able to do anything about Harvey. So it's looking a little static at the moment.
There behind Carter is Wigston, and I wonder whether we can possibly get a sight of Harvey. There, the yellow car, Garth Wigston. His 2nd place under threat. Down to John Smales in the pits again.
John Cooney, Alan Moffat's pit manager. Not a bad stop from him, the best in the race. The professionalism working well, eh?
Well, a bit of practice yesterday helped. We spent a bit of time trying to practice pit stops.
Moffat was pointing very, very savagely towards the right rear-hand side of the motor car.
Just changing the right rear tyre as a precaution.
You weren't expecting to do that?
Oh, we thought we might, but it was just a precaution.
The driver happy?
Yes, yeah, well, we think anyway.
Thank you, John. Right.
Grice, the BMW, running well, and be quite happy to be in the top 6. More happy about that than about the blue smoke from the car. Fairly free revving engine, running up to the 7,000 odd revs. 6-cylinder only, and therefore here, running in the 3 to 6 litre class against the V8s, but at Bathurst running in the 6-cylinder class, where they've brought in an innovation. It will not be in the same class as the V8s.
If you watch closely if you're able to see under the left side of the car, next time the car's on camera, there's a breather pipe dangling. I would suspect it's the gearbox breather pipe, and that could be the source of his oil. Can be seen, it's just a piece of plastic hose. There's no danger of it causing damage in itself, and I'd suspect that's the problem.
Wigston is getting away from Harvey, unfortunately. The gap is now up to 15 seconds. So Harvey's bid for 2nd place is not looking so good. Chris Hayer gets moving again in the Gulf, having had a breather there at the Mobile Kink for a couple of laps. As Peter Brock streaks up the back straight. Now back to John Smales again in the pits.
Well, usually it's the ladies who sit in the pits, clicking the watches, doing the lap times, being worried about their men on the track. Fred Gibson is in the pits. Christine Gibson is in the car. Fred, do you worry about it?
Oh, not really, John. I think the car's pretty safe. She knows what she's doing, and she'll get the job done okay.
It's the first time she's driven a big Falcon, is it not?
Yeah, it's the first time she's driven for a fair while now. She's done a lot of practice at Oran Park. This is her first race for a fairly good long time.
You're both going to be racing in the James Hardy 1000 together, or in separate motor cars as competitors.
That's right. That's what I'm a bit afraid about.
ride. Yeah. Christine is a very competent driver, but there's a lot of traffic out there, Fred, for someone who's not driven. Surely there must be some concern.
Oh, there is a bit, John, but she's taking her time. She's not rushing things. She's only doing 19s, which is a good, consistent time. And all we're down here for is to give them practice in the car, Joe and Christine, and sort of see if we finish the race for change.
Where's she lying, by the way?
Oh, I think she'll be up in the first 10 anyway, which is quite good for the speed we're going, really.
Fred Gibson, best of luck. I hope you enjoy the nerves in the pits.
Thanks very much, John.
Very talented driver, Chris Gibson. Got a lot of time for her. Housewife and mother, but very clean driver, very pleasant and jolly sort of personality. And first time she ever ran in a big car, she drove with complete distinction. Ford Park, their 300-kilometre enduro. She's run mostly small cars in her career. Hasn't done a lot of driving, as Fred was saying, in recent years. And is easy on the car, safe, but pretty quick. Onto the main straight. Still the traffic, still the melee. Murray Carter. And isn't he doing well? And in behind him, Steve Harrington. And there's something doing not so well. The Daily Hopwood Capri. And boy, that's intuitive camera coverage to stick with that car in an enormous amount of trouble.
That was Brock.
How close was it to a hit? Quite incredible.
Well, how would you feel if you'd taken the leader out like that?
And Terry Daly.
Was it Brock or Haas?
I think that was Peter Brock.
Deciding that...
very hard to see in the smoke.
That's as good a spot as any to leave the car. And let's have a look at the replay. And in fact, it is the race leader.
Yes.
So have a look at this for race history almost being rewritten. That consecutive 6-win run being made into a 7th, nearly disappearing. Brock knowing at this stage that he's going to come spearing back, feeling there's a possibility. And look, one decision, go that way. And then Daly says, no, changed my mind. Go the other. And Brock says, when's he going to leave me alone?
And he only just made it.
And wasn't it brilliant driving too?
Absolutely.
He didn't lock up, he didn't freeze.
A classic indication of a driver error there. There were two errors. The error when the car lost control, and you noticed that he did not put the brakes on. That's why the car was bouncing around like a ping-pong ball. Had he put the brakes on hard, he would have stayed on the right-hand side of the road. He was actually trying to drive out of it when the cause was so lost. It wasn't funny.
A bit like the Titanic with the water lapping on the deck.
When you get out into those situations, you put the brakes on hard and close your eyes.
Peter Brock in classic form, now cooling his hands up the back straight, and I reckon there'd be a few other bits of him that'd be feeling a bit taut after that little exercise, because you were saying earlier, Leo, that is it most cruel to go out on the first lap or the last? Certainly the cruelest thing to go out on is an accident with no fault of your own.
In the lead.
In the lead. But we've seen Johnson nearly bring him undone. We've seen Terry Daly nearly bring him undone. I think if Peter Brock comes home and wins this 7th Hang 10 400 on the trot, he will more than ever have earned that victory. 24 laps to go.
And down here in the pits, we can tell you how close it was. Those cars became very large as the Terry Daly car especially came out of control towards us. One man who was almost on the scene, in fact, at the fence, was Bob Forbes, who's helping out Charlie O'Brien today. Bob, what about Rocky's driving?
Well, John, all I can say is that's why the man wins motor races. He came round there, the yellow flag had been waving, he took the necessary precautionary step of slowing down, he analysed the situation, and as soon as that car had stopped, he picked the gap and went through.
Which is more than you can say for what we did in the pits.
This is quite right. And, you know, not taking anything away from Dick, it just seems that Peter has the concentration in these sort of events just to be able to drive through the traffic and keep out of trouble.
Bob, while we've got you, Charlie O'Brien was in second position. What's happened to him?
He stopped round in front of the grandstand, John, and we haven't had a report on what the trouble is.
Well, that's a shame. You're looking forward to a drive.
That's right. Bob, thank you. Okay, thanks.
Bob He's done some great work co-driving often for Kevin Bartlett. And very much the amateur racer, a very successful businessman with a very large business, doesn't employ a lot of people, but makes a lot of money, runs some very nice road cars, and just has a punt from time to time, and really drives very smoothly and well, Bob Forbes. But here's a man, arch professional, motor racing's his total career and job, although he's got other business interests now too. He hasn't worked a separate job for quite a number of years. That's the race situation over which he has command. Weakston, Harvey, Grice. Mentioned before that Johnson is being shown as being in second place by the official motorcraft scoreboard, and with Steve Harrington in third in 27.
I noticed Brock going up the back straight, obviously trying to get some cooling air in, putting his hand out of the window, directing the air onto his face. Obviously he's really feeling the effects of the race, even though it's not a very hot day today.
Well, he told us earlier down on the start line there of just how much physical and mental strain is involved in running this race. And the Capri in the pits, the Terry Daly car that very nearly brought him undone. And as usual at this stage, when something starts to go wrong, it becomes a succession of problems, and it sort of builds on and on until it becomes a catastrophe, Leo. Cars start looking tatty, everything's leaking, the drivers have had it.
Yes, it's not much fun to say. It seems to compound itself. The things won't fix themselves.
At about this stage, about half the crew are wondering why they're here, aren't they?
They were probably wondering that last night, because most of them would have been working through most of the night, just having a final look at the cars. I often used to wonder when I was motor racing, and you'd have a bad day, you'd tend to go home and wonder why you did it. But even more so, you'd wonder why the boys had been toiling for weeks and weeks, only to be disappointed.
Well, here's a man that puts so much into it, not just in the driving, which is the area where most people are concerned, but that car represents Dick Johnson's own thoughts on sorting, designing, building, and the power that he gets from the engines. He's involved in all of that. And keeping his pecker up, Leo, really, because with the car not behaving well, and with running on to two loss of control situations on the track, he still is hard into it, running in a very respectable placing, and obviously still concentrating.
Well, there's still a fair way to go, and stranger things have happened in motor racing. Races have been won from fifth position on more than one occasion.
John Bundy RX3 just in front of Johnson, the Bond Capri just behind. Bright sunshine, a very large crowd.
It's interesting that Murray Carter is in front of Alan Moffat, and I would think on their practice times that Alan won't be able to catch him.
Carter was a 16.3, Moffat was a 16.6, so really only a whisker. In fact, one imagines that with Moffat's perhaps greater aggression at this stage of the race, that he just might produce 3/10 or more of a second of determination.
Could well be, but then when he catches the Ford, he's got the problem of getting round it, because those Fords are quite wide, and they've got the power in the nice places, namely up and down the straight, where it's relatively simple to go quickly.
That we were looking forward to seeing here today, but which fortunately didn't appear, was the turbo Datsun Bluebird, to be driven by George Fury, and at Bathurst will be shared by Fred Gibson, the lead car, and two Japanese drivers in the second car. The problem is that a lot of development is being done here, but the two turbo engines being done in Japan and sent out, and they haven't arrived. And, a bit of a shame, because
certainly
as Bob Holden goes through in 52,
certainly a shame for the Datsun people, and because they're going to go to Bathurst with rather an unknown quantity.
It's a very serious factory effort, and one which will be interesting to watch in coming meetings. Shane Cowan and Brian Wheeler there in the RX3, keeping a close tail on Bob Holden in 52. That RX3 well out of it in practice times. Coming into 34th starting grid position.
The second Bob Holden car, the 1.6 litre Escort, is being driven by the TAA driver to Europe winner Philip Ravel, and another very good young Formula 4 driver, Ron Barnacle.
Yes, indeed.
Their first venture into taxi cab driving.
No,
well,
they've had a few runs in the car.
That's just got a Ford Crossflow engine, Formula Ford engine in it, actually, that car.
Yes. Quite standard motor.
Pretty close to standard. Bob Holden's a pretty good guy that way in helping out and getting people behind the wheel.
Well, Philip has nothing but praise from the way Bob's looked after him during the year. He's been doing the engines for him. And you probably recall that Stephen Brooks won the championship last year in that self-same car with the assistance again of Bob Holden.
Yes.
Because Bob's of about my vintage. He's been around for a long, long time, and there's nothing much about motor cars, and particularly Fords, that he doesn't know.
Indeed. Talking of Ford drivers, a man abandoning the camp, changing over to Japanese Mazda, Alan Moffat. Brief drives in Holden products, once a Bob Morris A9X, once Marlboro Holden dealer team Commodore. But other than that, and a Chevrolet Monza, has been in Fords almost throughout his career. 1964, came here as a young lad with a strong Canadian accent in a Lotus Cortina, and pounded that around the circuit pretty hard. And the crowd at Sandown today, we've shown you a number of shots showing just how many people are here. Have a look at them there around the S's. Have a look at them in the grandstand. You've seen them earlier. Peter Williamson goes by. 52,300, only a few thousand less than to the Fangio meeting. And it's not hard to believe, because there was an enormous queue of cars this morning, not much after 9 o'clock, coming into the circuit. The enormous grandstand is packed, you can see there, even at this late stage of this race and the meeting. And they had bigger pre-race ticket sales and bookings and inquiries, not only from locally but from interstate, than they had even for the Fangio meeting. And I'd say if this morning had been fine and sunny instead of very overcast and drizzly rain, it would have bowled over the crowd. And in fact, that could be a bigger crowd than they might get to the James Hardy 1000 at Bathurst, where over the last few years the crowds have tended to be falling.
Yes, well, let's hope the trend is going the other way and that people are encouraged to go and see it in person.
Indeed.
Because their television coverage is brilliant, but to be at the venue and hear the sounds and the sights and the noises and the beautiful exhaust notes, there's no real substitute for that.
And one of them well worth listening to is 44, the Alan Grice BMW. We've shown you a few of the cars there briefly. They're the ones that we're holding the major placings. Wigston would be delighted, not running regularly this year. John Harvey hasn't had a lot of outings either. Grice probably would like to see the car a little further forward. The irrepressible Murray Carter in 6th. And here's Johnson. Look at him. In behind and chasing the BMW. Peter Brock in the race lead, though, 2 laps in front. And Brock, has 18 to go, 17 and a half. He's completed 81. Alan Grice. Peter Williamson. The 3-litre class, Jerry Burgess, RX7, Dick Johnson. These 2 corners, that Repco and the next one Arco, claiming him earlier in the race due to the problem with rear shock absorbers. A lot of people don't realise, even in road cars, the enormous amount of heat that gets into shock absorbers and the enormous amount of fade that you can get, and how materially this can affect the car's behaviour, and not just in going over bumps, but handling through corners, body roll, and behaviour under brakes.
Particularly under brakes, very much so. Yes, I think people that travel quickly in the country and probably wonder why their car sometimes starts to feel a bit strange and wonder whether they've chosen the wrong kind of brand of tyres, would possibly find that if they got under the car and put their hand on the shock absorbers, they'd lose some skin.
Yes, yes, it's very hard to get the heat out of them, and in fact it was an important part of the Holden Commodore design, and integral even to the way the race cars perform. But when they brought them here, a very successful car in Europe as an Opel, when it was brought here and ran in outback testing, the shock absorbers got so hot that they locked solid, the front struts, and they had to in fact make them liquid cooled to, under the rough road conditions in Australia, to get enough heat out of them to make them viable. There's an early development problem with the Commodore. Not necessary at all in European temperatures and road conditions, but absolutely critical here.
Probably over there they'd need to put heaters on them.
As up the back straight strides Dick Johnson, 5.7 litres, down the bottom 3 litres, V6 Capri, Colin Bond going so well. Another master driver, hill climb driver, rally driver, and very successful race driver in single-seaters too. The race leader has, as you can see, 16 laps to go. That's 48 kilometres. If he completes that in the present position, he will have won this race on the trot since 1975, 7 times in succession, and adding 1973 to it 8 times overall.
And according to our lap chart here, the 3-litre class is being led, of course, by Colin Bond's Capri, and with the Burgess RX-7 and the Bundy RX-7 in 2nd and 3rd places. The peripheral ported cars, of course, are in the next class up.
BMW.
And Dick Johnson has 12 seconds to try and gain on Alan Grice with 16 laps to go, so theoretically he can do it.
Here's
to
Grice,
move up another place.
Not very far behind John Harvey.
And despite his earlier dramas, Peter Williamson is definitely leading the 2-litre class with the Toyota Celica.
Chris Gibson, formerly Chris Cole, round the back there, then Moffat. And John Harvey there with some degree of pressure on him. Alan Grice, you can see, not so very far behind.
Two seconds.
Steve Harrington, Garth Wigston car. What a good run. Young boy took the first stint. The driver declaring his retirement last year and who is having his first outing this year, to my knowledge, Garth Wigston, and slotting it on our lap chart at the moment into 2nd place. The Motorcraft scoreboard says he's 3rd, but either of those positions is a great credit to him indeed.
And I saw Phil Brock is still going, by the way, in the Gemini. There he is, Phil Brock in the Gemini. A little bit battered around the front still, but going well.
Fascinating part of the circuit here as Alan Grice comes spearing off the top. John Harvey not far in front of him. Chris Gibson sandwiched between them temporarily. Grice going out for a long way around and didn't pull it off and probably wasted a little bit of time there.
That was the last thing he needed because it's going to affect his run onto the straight.
And he's got the information from Frank Gardner and the boys in the pits. Got radio contact as well as the usual pit signalling equipment. And he's out after John Harvey. And he tails him by 2.35 seconds. You can see the gap there. Very little in it. And let's hear about the situation from John Smales in the pit area.
I've got Frank Gardner with me. He's the pit manager for the Alan Grice team, and the gap's only 3 seconds to 3rd place for him.
Down to 3 seconds with about 20 laps to run, so...
How is Grice handling it? Is he catching him?
He's
he's been pulling him in for the last 15 laps at about a second a lap, so we're looking good at this point in time.
Well, that's a big feather in your cap to get up there into third place if he can do it. But, of course, John Harvey is not an easy man to pass.
John will have a very wide car, I would think, in about the next 4 laps.
You happy with the car, Frank?
Cars ran well all day. Yes, we're very happy with it. We're all pretty new with it with long-distance racing, but it's certainly come into line nicely, and if it finishes today, we'll be more than pleased.
The smoke that Grice was complaining about in the cockpit, is it getting worse or better?
No, it's gone away. It's cured itself, so it's obviously run out of oil or we're cured.
Great, Gardner, thank you.
Well, it doesn't look as if it's cured to us from our picture. As you saw there, a little bit of smoke coming still from the back of the BMW 635 CSI.
And did you notice that breather pipe trailing under the middle of the car?
A 16.66 second lap for John Harvey, being hounded and chased and reined in by Alan Grice. Tends to pick its inside rear wheel up on occasions and spin it a bit. Independent rear suspension on the car, but the geometry of it is such that it can do that even as a road car. Absolutely magnificent free spinning engines. They seem to want to rev forever. And I reckon if they had 4.5 or 5 litres, they would be absolutely delighted. But the basic motor that's in Alan Grice's car, the 635 with 12 laps to go, 36 kilometres. The basic motor in turbocharged form can push out 700, 800 horsepower in the CSL coupes that they run in Europe, and spin its wheels in any gear up to fifth. Something that Ronnie Peterson, among others, revelled in the past, having all that sort of power on tap.
That's what I need. I need a car like that.
To do the shopping?
Yes, I really do.
Yes, well, I think they have a fair bit of boot space. This tussle here, you know, could well be decided by luck of the draw in the traffic jams.
I think Grice, frankly, has got too much on him for that to be critical. Unless, of course, he gets brought entirely undone.
Well, you know, unless Harves is in a bit of bother and is prepared to let him go, Grice is in trouble.
Yes, he is.
Yep.
Yes, Grice is out of it.
Well, that makes the argument academic.
Yep. Well, what bad luck. And fairly certainly it'll be a pit stop, and Alan Grice's perhaps prophetic remark about either the problem has cured itself or he's run out of oil might be the answer to this slow lap by Alan Grice.
Well, can we see any lights glowing in the cockpit?
Well, Frank, of course, was being very tongue-in-cheek when he said perhaps it's cured itself, because motor cars don't cure themselves, unfortunately.
No. Dick Johnson comes by. Well, dear oh me, nobody could say the race has ever been static for very long. There'll be a fair few drivers and crews around who'd wish that it had been more static.
I found it one of the more entertaining races of recent years, actually.
Yes, indeed. It's been a fascinating race, and is still a good race, yes. and still a very interesting race. As Grice comes down into the pits, we'll leave it to John Smales.
No, not into the pits. No. He's gone past the pit road. I think he's going to park it permanently.
No, a signal to them that he's coming the next lap. Or is it?
Well, what's the point of all that? That all seems a very pointless operation, to be driving around the track, wasting time, if there's anything at all they can do to fix that car.
But let's hear from John Smales down there with Frank Gardner.
Well, I'm not with Frank Gardner. It would appear that Alan Grice was trying to tell them that he's coming to the pit on the next lap. ABC Sports stopped, though, or could have saved him that trouble. He doesn't have radio contact with Gardner. I told Gardner when I heard you on main commentary, Will, and the JPS team was ready for him on that lap, but he's now lost a lap while he goes around again, waiting for them to get ready. So if he'd believed in the television, he could have been in the pits and fixed already.
And may in fact be compounding the problem, of course, by driving at that extra 3 kilometres of another lap. The rear lights have been glowing as if he's had his lights on, but the headlights aren't on. Obviously, he hasn't got his feet on the brakes there. So what's going on at that end of the car? I haven't been able to sort out for a few laps either.
I'm rather mystified by it because I almost thought half a lap back that it might have been a handling problem because the car seemed to be bouncing around a bit. But it could be only because it's going so slow. With a very firm suspension,
Yes,
the
yes.
car's bouncing a little bit on the bumps in the circuit.
Well, an extra 3 kilometres he needn't have done had he not known that we were never live.
And he's not in again. So,
Very
the most
strange.
curious problem, well, the other solution, of course, is that it's an incurable problem, which could be stuck in gear or something,
And he's going to
and the
nurse it
only
around.
answer is just to try and keep it out there, which is probably, in fact, the truth of the situation. He probably knows it's a terminal disease. The race leader has 10 laps to go, and that's worth about 13 or 14 minutes. So that's the time that Alan Grice has to wrestle with the agony and worry as to whether he can keep the car mobile for that long. Murray Carter just going by him, the man that he thought he had lined up, John Harvey, in 25.
I wonder if Frank Gardner has any idea at all what exactly is wrong with the car.
They were talking earlier of gearbox, so I'd say that could...
Yes, and I think your theory of it possibly being jammed in a gear will well be the problem.
This man's jammed into a rhythm, and as he said, and he's they love him. As he said, each year for the last few years, surely the luck can't stay with me. But by gee, hasn't the luck stayed with him? The way that he got around the spinning Terry Daly Capri, the way that he was able to knock off speed and get around Johnson and inherit the lead.
And
But
doesn't
then,
he also make a lot of his own
He
luck
makes a lot. I was going to say that a lot of it was built-in sensing and anticipation. And his young brother, though, Philip, not such a happy day and has never really been anywhere near the same class as his brother, has he?
No, he was quite successful in series production a few years ago, but he's never raced it often, of course, or as seriously as Peter.
Leo, just a little prod on the brakes there from Peter Brock, rather like drivers used to do to keep the pedal pressure up. Of course, it's not necessary these days.
Oh, well, can be here. Brake wear at Sandown is exceptionally high, easily as high as at Bathurst, if not more, mainly because the brakes get hot and they have less time to recover. This part of the circuit that we're looking at now is a very hard braking area there, of course, and with just a few seconds respite, the brakes go on again. The brake temperatures there would be something like 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, heat is the enemy of brake pads, and the wear factor, probably just in those few seconds, the brakes get more worn than on the rest of the circuit put together.
With the causeway coming up, it's a nice bit of confidence too, just to feel there's a bit of pedal there.
Johnson, 17. 2 spins, crook rear shock absorbers, but still running hard and fairly fast, and in 4th place. And considering his problems, 4th place, nothing to be ashamed of either. Didn't run in the race last year, Dick Johnson, nor did Kevin Bartlett in the Camaro, as Bartlett's elected to do this year.
Just listening to the BMW going down the straight, and I suspect that it is box trouble. It sounded as though it was just running slowly in a lower gear. Maybe from where he got into trouble, it would probably be 3rd gear.
Peter Brock has completed 113 laps, is on his 114th in a 119 lap race.
Well, we have a pretty interesting situation here with regard to the overall placings. Well, the start line judges, who are in fact the judges of fact, will be pulling the cars in at the end of the race if it finishes as it is now, with Peter Brock first, John Harvey second, Murray Carter third, Stephen Harrington fourth, and Dick Johnson fifth. But there are a lot of things to be sorted out with the timekeepers, and there's been an awful lot of changes of pit stops, of cars stopping and then starting again. It's a very difficult job.
Well, not only does it not agree with our lap chart, which in the last 4 years has been right, but it also doesn't agree with the Motorcraft scoreboard being shown at the circuit, which shows Brock from Johnson from Harrington.
And which is hardly ever right.
And let's hear from John Smales in the pit area.
The confusion's about as rife down here as well. Depends on who you talk to up and down pit row as to who's coming where, but the general consensus of opinion certainly says Brock, Harrington, Harvey in that order. Meantime, the problem with Alan Grice is transmission problems back in the drive shaft somewhere. Changes gear all right, but it won't take any power at all. So Alan Grice is now simply cruising around to get the checkered flag.
Well, we know where this chap is anyway. Peter Brock, heading for his 7th win in this classic event. Coming up on Peter McLeod's RX-7. About to lap him as they approach the causeway. There he goes, smoothly, no fuss, no danger.
Remind you again of October 17 and 18, I think the next ABC Motorsport coverage. Castrol 6-hour race for production bikes at Amaroo Park in Sydney. There's the crowd now with 4 laps to go, getting very, very jubilant. We'll be showing practice, some of practice day, and the bulk of the activity on race day there. Laps 115 completed, 117 seconds in front. But on Saturday, let's remind you again of that film, Gentlemen, Lift Your Skirts, all about the new technology in Grand Prix racing of downforce and aerodynamics, but some marvellous pre-war footage, a documentary from England, marvellous pre-war footage, some marvellous stuff from Keith Duckworth, the designer of the Ford Cosworth 3-litre Grand Prix engine, telling that when a piston is being stopped at the top of its stroke in a Cosworth Formula 1 engine, it's trying to put a 7-ton force on the crankshaft and talking about the forces that go on in an engine at racing speed. So watch that on that Saturday, October 17.
Well, Brock is looking a little tired, but still time to wave to the crowd as he goes round. His elbow on the side of the car. The crowd is really beginning to rise to him. A familiar situation for him here at Sandown with just 2 laps to go.
We've changed it, it's 3.
I think the crowd were misled by the scoreboard,
yes,
which indicates that that was going to be the final lap.
And we'll have a change of mind too and say that he's getting the last lap board at the end of this lap, so he's 1.5 to go. And really, what a fine effort it's been. He's a great driver, there's no question of it. And what a thrill it would be to see Peter in single-seater race cars, as we saw him a few years ago in a Formula 2 Barana. Because, Leo, I think you'd agree his smoothness and the way that he gets the car down, the power on, the way he brakes, the way he gets it through corners would be admirably suited to a quicker car, single-seater.
Well, he did enjoy the brief time that he spent in the Barana back in '73, but I think his commitments to General Motors and the amount of workload that he'd accepted in driving for the dealer team just prevented him from concentrating on single-seater racing. I imagine it probably still would.
Well, we saw him bouncing off the curbs down at Causeway there. He's really not necessary to be doing that at this particular point in the race. Whether it was just a very minor lapse of concentration or what, it's hard to say, but he only has to go through that section once more to reach the flag.
Well, in fact, the last lap sign, I think, is about to be shown to him at the end of this lap. The Motorcraft scoreboard is retired from the game because it's advertised 1 lap to go and has reduced that by 1 and got to 0, and everything's still continuing. And as I say, I think the last lap board is being prepared for Peter Brock down on the finish line now. And round he goes, the flat part of the circuit where the cars are accelerated up to fairly high speeds, Leo, and in fact your brother Ian Gagan wrapped a Falcon up fairly well down in that area of Dunlop Bridge.
Yes, that Dunlop Bridge, he tried very hard to knock it over.
It was one of the bigger accidents. The last lap sign is being shown to Peter Brock in 0.5, 3.1 kilometres to go, about 1 minute 15, 1 minute 16 at current race pace, being hounded by Peter Williamson in 77, but that won't go on for very long.
And there's not a person in the grandstand that's sitting.
Look at the style of a champion. Because we really have seen him in 2 situations today where experience, guile, skill, and a little bit of sixth sense has really served him very, very well indeed. And one of those frustrating sportsmen who makes it look all so easy.
He even got time to have his arm out of the window right at the most difficult part of the course down through the S's.
He didn't last year, if you remember, when he found his way around Alan Moffat down there in a seemingly a foolhardy move, but a move which his great flair pulled off.
Even here, he can afford a wave. I'd want both hands on the wheel coming through that section.
Well, he's delighted, and he's earned it. 7 wins on a row, 8 altogether in the Sandown Enduro. The winner of the Hang 10 400 for 1981. 7 times in a row, Peter Brock for the Marlborough Holden dealer team in car 05.
2 hours, 30 minutes and 37.8 seconds was the race time. Wasn't long ago it took all of 3 hours. And there the crew greets their driver. Can there be any question of this man being obviously Australia's greatest touring car driver, certainly in the last 15 years? Time and time again he overcomes difficulties, and these smooth, beautifully driven wins are a joy for everyone who is a motor racing enthusiast. It really has paid off to a great extent that he's stayed in Australia. He could have raced overseas, but and has indeed done that, but decided to stay here and be really the best we've ever seen. And I think most top overseas drivers who've raced against him in this country, in the Hardy-Ferodo, would never question that. Bruce Nowacki, the team chief there, in the passenger seat with him on this lap of honour. Such a familiar thing for Peter Brock here at Sandown. The crowd enjoying every minute of it. And even the Ford fans must appreciate the incredible skills of this man. He's looking very hot, very tired, as indeed he should be after a hard, long race like that. At least at Bathurst he'll have Jim Richards sharing the drive with him. Peter McLeod's RX-7 behind, refusing to overtake the race winner and take any glory as he comes under Dunlop Bridge. Crowds on the fences, people coming out of the grandstand. Peter Williamson Salika there coming under Dunlop Bridge. Winner of the 2-litre class. Poor Charlie O'Brien's car parked disconsolately there on the grass. And here they come, the fans, for a closer sight of the man they've been applauding for the last 25 laps. Flags waving. What a reception for any race driver. There he is. What's the first thing you think of after a race, Peter? Bruce Nowacki taking a drink from his onboard flask. Out he comes. Adrian Ryan helps him a little bit. Into the presentation enclosure, Coca-Cola. That must taste wonderful.
Well, Peter Brock, the winner again at the Hang 10 400, 7 times in a row. It's just your circuit and your race.
Yeah, I don't know why it is, Drew. I worked very, very hard today, particularly early on there to not only stay with Dick Johnson. In fact, I had to drive a little bit beyond what I wanted to drive to keep him in sight. And then there was, of course, an incident where Dick spun down the corner, and I was very lucky to get through. And then I had a second life when I think it was a fourth three. It's right, yeah. I saw it coming, and I kept on going down a gear, going from one side of the track to the other, and very, very close. But Lady Luck smiled at me again.
And you conceded before the race that Dick's car was faster.
Yeah.
So for you to beat him again and perhaps force him into a couple of errors was just a great piece of driving.
That's all I could try to do all day, and I thought it was, from where I sat, it was magnificent racing. We were lapping faster than what we were doing during the Touring Car Championship, and to do that during a long-distance event says something for the cars, and I started to see the tail enders very early on. In fact, I wouldn't mind betting we'd lap the field fairly early on indeed.
I think so, yeah. And Pete, just in case people might look at the race and think, well, it was just a stroll once Dick had spun once. Well, the incidents you mentioned and the way you look as though you just wrung out after 400k.
Yeah. No, I was still doing 1 minute 15 point something there towards the end. I think my second last lap was a 15.2. And the main reason I did that, I can assure you, is I wanted to see what the tyre wear and the brake wear is like after this event. I could have cruised a little bit earlier on, sure, but I gave it everything I had. So now I've got some pretty good answers on the board for the James Hardy 1000 in 3 weeks.
Well, a company you would know very well. Hang 10 have been pretty good to you, and it's 7 times.
Congratulations, Peter.
Thank you very much.
6 times in a row. 7 all up.
7 in a row and 8 all up, actually.
Oh, well, 7 in a row, 8 all up. Fantastic. Fantastic.
I think I ought to give up.
Looks like it's going to be a good one for Bathurst, I think, as well.
Yes, I think that we're in for a boomer at Bathurst. There's no doubt about that. This year is going to be a sprint race. I think I did a 1 minute 12.7 during that race then with a full tank of petrol and a lot of 13s early on. And that augurs well for the 100 mile per hour lap getting broken during the James Hardy. And I think Dick will be the boy to do it, but I won't be too far behind.
Oh, well, I think there's a little bit of drama out there, which all in all makes it a great race.
Yes.
Great. Fantastic.
Thanks, Mark Burton and Peter Brock, congrats. And there are a lot of fans over there ready to welcome you as you walk across the lawn.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah. Right, we're on.
Accompanied by the Marlborough girls. There are lots of pleasant things about winning a motor race, and that must not be the least of them. Kerry Luckins there, the Light Car Club president, bringing up the rear, so to speak, as Peter comes across to greet the crowd, and you just listen to them when he reaches the microphone.
Washington 16th, a really sensational class field. Should be a tremendous race. Will be very hard. Bob Morris